Chapter 478. After Hua Yin left, Suli called Yin Zai, Lvu, Dongfang Wuxue, and others. She gave them some cultivation treasures and assigned them individual tasks. Then she announced that she would practice in isolation. At the entrance of the forbidden area in the back mountain, Yin Zai, who was emaciated and sallow, had returned to the appearance of a handsome young man. Lvu still wore a green robe and looked old. He looked at Dongfang Wuxue with a pair of cunning eyes and asked curiously, "Wuxue, what did the master give you?" "Third brother, take it out and have a look." Yin Zai also echoed with a smile. During this time, the three of them worked for Su Li and worked together to manage the sect. They had already become familiar with each other. Yin Zai even proposed the idea of being sworn brothers. However, Lvu always felt that he was not talented enough and always disagreed. However, Yin Zai was familiar with Dongfang Wuxue's address of third brother. Dongfang Wuxue looked helpless. After his physical body was reconstructed, he still looked like a young man. He looked too young. At the same time, he did not forget to take out the elixirs that Su Li gave him and shook them. His tone was complicated and moved. 10 Tianjing elixirs. The spiritual power inside is easier to absorb than the celestial stone. I can restore my cultivation in less than 10 days. This kind of elixir, even the Dongfang family may not have one. I don't know where the master got it. Indeed, even in the holy sect where I come from, this kind of elixir is absolutely a strategic resource and extremely rare. Yin Zai nodded in agreement and then showed 5 Wujing elixirs. With the help of these elixirs, I will definitely break through the bottleneck and reach Huashan realm within half a year. Mister, he couldn't have robbed a holy sect, right? Don't joke. I think the master got an inheritance similar to Song Lei's cave. Ha ha, that's true. Lvu looked at them enviously and laughed. He looked at the Poying elixir in his hand. Although this elixir was the least valuable among the three, it was what he needed most now. And he had every reason to believe that when he reached the bottleneck of Yuanying realm, as long as his contribution was enough, he would inevitably get the help of Wujing elixir. He held the elixir in his hand and was thrilled. Once again, he was extremely glad that he made the right decision. From that moment on, his fate was completely different. After talking and laughing, the three left respectively. They all had their own tasks to complete. Since Su Li asked them alone, they would not disclose it to anyone or ask. Although Su Li told Yin Zai and others to practice in isolation was a cover, it still took her 3 days to refine the external incarnation of the Ghost Clan. It was relatively easy to refine the outer body incarnation of the Ghost Clan. After several failures and familiarizing herself with the technique, her success rate soon reached 100%. She also took the time to study the bloodstone in between. With this research, they really did find some clues. In the addendum, there were 20 rows of external incarnations neatly leaning against the wall. Their faces were the same as Su Li's, which was quite frightening at first glance. At this moment, Su Li's attention was not on it, but on the blood-colored crystal in the hands of the evil ghost. At this time, the blood-colored crystal stone was emitting a dazzling light. There was a blood-colored mist around the crystal stone, which was constantly drilling into his body through the shadow of the evil ghost. Su Li's eyes were extremely bright. She was not a pure member of the primordial ghost clan, but the evil ghost had absorbed the souls of countless ghosts, so it was purer than her own body. Since the blood of the human clan had no effect on the blood crystal, she tried to let the evil ghost control the blood crystal. This control was a direct success. When a certain amount of the bloody mist poured in, Su Li saw that the fist-sized bloody crystal became smaller. At the same time, an instinct arose from the bottom of her heart. Boom! The scorching blood and pneuma gushed out, and the temperature of the whole addendum rose instantly. Su Li only felt that the pneuma and blood in her body were boiling, as if she had inexhaustible strength. My strength has improved by at least 50%. After a rough sensing, Su Li smiled. Her physical body was extremely strong, and it was nothing to burn this pneuma and blood. She could make up for it in a few breaths. It's a pity that there are too few bloodstones. Suli took back the bloodstone in the hands of the evil ghost, shook her head, and smiled. It was a pleasant surprise that she could solve the secret of the bloodstone before she went to Zisha's appointment. She was a little greedy. Thinking of this, she narrowed her eyes slightly and waved her sleeves. All external incarnations in the addendum automatically flew into the universe ring. She wiped the ring with her palm, and a delicate communication jade rune flashed out. Suli stared at the shining Su character carved on it. Her gentle eyes suddenly became cold, and she slightly exerted force in her hand. The jade rune was crushed. At the same time, in the noble grand palace of the Su family far away, Su Chunka, who was meditating, suddenly shivered and opened his eyes. His eyes were blank for a moment, and then they became gloomy. He got up and flew out of the palace to the huge palace at the highest point of the mountains. Only halfway, he heard a low and old voice in his ear. Chinka, have you finally figured out how to explain the matter of the second branch of the Su family? Su Chinka's figure stagnated, and then he landed in front of the palace gate. He bowed submissively and said, "Brother, I didn't deliberately conceal it. There's indeed something in this matter. Now the time has come, and it's time for you to take action." At this moment, he heard a laugh beside his ear, and the palace doors opened on their own without a sound. "I'd like to see what you can say." Su Chinka's eyes flashed, and he stepped into the palace. After a while, he saw his brother, who was hundreds of times stronger than him, and the pillar of the Su family, Su Zhuanyan. Su Zhuanyan was 900 years older than Su Chinka, but his face was much younger than Su Chinka. He seemed to be in his 30s. His face was gentle and elegant, like a scholar who was well-read. Su Chinka didn't dare to be disrespectful to him. He came over and saluted first, and then he said, "Brother, I don't need to say more about the matter of the second branch of the Su family. You have almost understood it." Su Zhuanyan narrowed his eyes, looked at his biological brother, nodded gently, and said in a leisurely tone, "First, the demon crystal disappeared. You didn't continue to chase it, but went to the second branch. Su Dingchuan abandoned Su Dingxian inexplicably and supported Su Dayin. Even you showed kindness to Su Dayin, but you didn't ask for any benefits. This is not like you. If you and I were not born of the same mother, and your soul breath was still familiar to me, I would really think that you were replaced by an evil spirit." After that, his eyes flashed, and his doubts grew stronger. Su Chinka frowned and showed a sad expression. He said with grievance, "Brother, I did all this for the Su family. How can you doubt me so much?" "Oh." Su Zhuanyan raised his eyebrows. Su Chinka didn't wait for him to speak and said with a little excitement, "Brother's doubts are actually the same thing. I received a message from Su Dayin that day and went to the Blackstone Forest, but the demon crystal had disappeared strangely. I was very angry at that time and ordered Su Jinan to investigate it. Then I promised Su Dayin to go to the second branch to mediate the contradiction between her and Su Dingxian. Who knows? I accidentally found a big secret." Speaking of this, Su Chinka subconsciously lowered his voice, and his eyes flashed. "In the Blackstone Forest, there is a big demon born from heaven and earth." As soon as this was said, Su Zhuanyan, who had always been calm, finally changed his face. He said coldly, "How dare you lie to me? An ice demon has just appeared in the ghost region. How can another big demon appear in a short time? And every time a big demon is born, there must be a vision. How can I not receive the news?" Su Chinka didn't panic when he heard this. Instead, he smiled and said, "Brother, I didn't say that the big demon was just born, huh?" Su Zhuanyan sat up straight, and his expression suddenly eased. "Tell me in detail." If Su Chinka really lied, Su Zhuanyan would have panicked a long time ago. He could continue to stare at the pressure and continue to speak. Su Zhuanyan finally believed him a little. The remaining 90% depended on what Su Chinka said. However, how could there be loopholes in Su Li's carefully woven trap? At the moment, Su Chinka looked refreshed and immediately said, "When I went to the second branch, I felt that Su Dayin's new disciple, Su Jiuzhou, was fearless and had a strange attitude, so I paid more attention to her. After a few days of secret investigation, I found that she colluded with a big demon in the Black Stone Forest. After I searched Su Jiuzhou's soul, I knew that the big demon was a demon snake that had lived for many years, and it was a natural big demon. It had never been envied by natural law in these years of cultivation, but the big demon was about to slough today. Brother, you naturally know what it means. Su Chinka clenched his fists heavily, and his eyes were full of excitement and fanaticism, as if what he said was his personal experience. Su Zhuanyan's eyebrows and eyes jumped slightly. Snake slew? After the big demon snake slew, its strength must be greatly increased, and it is no longer protected by natural law. There must be a thunder test, he talked to himself, and suddenly remembered that there was a short thunder test in the Blackstone Forest a few days ago, but didn't strike anything. Only a group of casual practitioners were killed. It was true. What Suchinka said was all true. If some words were said, it would feel fake. But Suchinka said half of a sentence, and Su Zhuanyan linked all kinds of traces together, immediately convinced him. At this moment, his heart, which had been silent for thousands of years, beat violently. He didn't count on the big demon ghost region, but this big demon was obviously stronger and more powerful. If he could get it and use it as medicine, maybe he could become a junior emperor? Thinking of this, he suddenly looked at Suchinka. As soon as he spoke, his tone changed. How long before the snake slew? Su Zhuanyan stood up. Suchinka laughed. I don't know, but Su Jiuzhou is the stove made by the big demon to resist nature's test. As long as we follow Su Jiuzhou, we will have a bright future. It's normal that you don't know the time of the snake slew. Su Zhuanyan nodded and suddenly frowned and said angrily, Bastard, you hide such an important thing and don't report it. If you fail to kill the demon because of insufficient preparation time, I will punish you. After that, Su Zhuanyan flicked his sleeves and left in a hurry. Suchinka shrank his neck and waited until Su Zhuanyan's pneuma completely disappeared in his perception. He raised his head and laughed nervously. Chapter 479. Master, fortunately, I didn't fail you. The jade token sent a message, and Suchinka's voice echoed in her ears. Suli smiled beautifully. She looked up at the tall and desolate mountains and stepped into the forest. Her figure was submerged by the vegetation. Just a few seconds after she entered, two obscure streamers landed outside the forest. After the light dissipated, the figures of Suchinka and Su Zhuanyan appeared. This barren forest is famous for its low nimbus in Jiuzhou region. If the mighty demon wants to pass the test, it must be supplied with nimbus. How could it make such a stupid mistake? Su Zhuanyan's lips buzzed. Suchinka also pretended to think and responded, the weaker the spiritual aura is, the lower the power of nature's punishment will be. The mighty demon may have other plans. Let's go in and see. As he said, he was about to leave, but Su Zhuanyan frowned and stopped him. Suchinka's heart thumped. Did he reveal a flaw? Since it is a resourceful mighty demon, it is hard to guarantee that it has the means of perception that we don't know. When nature's test comes and disturbs the rules, we can go in. Suchinka breathed a sigh of relief and nodded again and again. He said with fear, Brother, you are really thoughtful. Su Zhuanyan seemed to be in a good mood and scolded with a smile. If you are calm, your cultivation will not stop a Huashan realm. After getting the mighty demon, you could take some Hongshan elixir back and refine your mind. The implication was obviously that he was not going to share the mighty demon with Suchinka. Suchinka was not afraid, but he was overjoyed. Thank you, brother. Su Zhuanyan saw that he was so sensible, and the smile on his face was more intense. Suli walked steadily all the way until she stopped by the huge lake at the top of the mountain. She looked around with twinkling eyes. This boundless lake was obviously dug recently, but there were not many excavation traces left. It was mostly dug by the group of faceless snake men in Zisha's hands. In fact, it was true. Through the clear lake, she immediately saw the entangled snake men at the bottom of the lake. It was dense like a snake cave. You really came. Very good. The charming voice of the purple evil spirit came from all directions, which made Suli unable to find the source. She only knew that it was hidden in the large number of demon crystals under the lake. I came as promised, but you didn't even show your face? Suli took a deep breath and said in a cold tone. She was usually calm, but at this moment, there was unconcealable anxiety and uneasiness. Hee, don't you humans have a saying? One must always be on guard against others. I don't want to give away my tens of thousands of years of cultivation to someone else. Suli frowned, and her tone was slightly cold. It seemed that she was angry. Zisha, you are too much. I've never broken the agreement between us, and I've never told anyone about you. I naturally know what you have done. Otherwise, do you think you can still come in front of me alive? In the end, Zisha's soft tones suddenly became cold. Suli tightened her body slightly and snorted, Don't talk nonsense. I'm here as promised. I will only help you stall for a quarter of an hour. If the abnormal phenomenon attracts others, I won't be blamed. That's natural, since you are ready to accept nature's punishment. Then, as you wish. Before she finished her words, the calm lake in Suli's sight immediately rippled. At first, it was like a breeze blowing, but as time went by, the wind gradually raged. The slight ripple was immediately pushed by an unknown force into a stormy wave, which turned into a waterspout and rushed to the sky. Whoosh! The broken water splashed into raindrops and poured down. Suli stared at the water vortex without blinking. Her pupils slowly contracted, and the fear grew stronger. Suddenly, whoosh, 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 countless serpent men turned into a ray of light, circling around the water column and going against the current. The densely packed serpent men writhed madly and hissed at the sky. If it was an ordinary cultivator, just seeing this scene was enough to scare them to the point of fainting. It has begun. Outside the barren forest, Su Juanyin saw the waterspout into the sky, and his eyes were full of horror. If he still had a 90% guess before, at this moment he saw it with his own eyes. There was no doubt in his heart. He thought quickly about how to kill the demon with the least cost. Boom! The snake-shaped thunderbolt flashed, and the sky suddenly became dark. It was so dark that one could not see his fingers. The thunderbolt flashed for a moment, and 1/10 of the snakes were chopped into pieces of minced meat. Blood rained. Suli stood on the shore and looked up at the apocalyptic scene in the distance quietly. She let the blood fall on her face and be washed clean by the rain. The cycle was endless. What a big thundercloud. Even the sky is completely covered. Su Chinka and Su Juanyin stood in the distance with horror in their eyes. At this moment, although their cultivations were in different realms, their thoughts were very consistent. Su Jiuzhou, do it. But at this moment, there was a roar full of anger in the barren forest. It was completely different from the gentle female voice before. Instead, it was like the voice of countless men and women mixed together, which made Su Juanyin's hair stand on end. Even if the strength of this mighty demon dropped sharply during the snake slew, would he be her opponent? But the thought of retreating only flashed in his mind for a moment, and it was completely overwhelmed by the huge benefits of killing the demon queen. Kill at all costs. Suli was wet all over, and her face was cold. She looked at the lake with a pale red color because 80% of the snakes were dead, and said unhurriedly, What are you afraid of? The snakes are not dead yet. I will only help you for a quarter of an hour. If I make a move too early and you can't make it, what should I do if you drag me to death? While saying this, Suli retreated without a trace, and immediately felt that she was locked by an extremely dangerous thought, as if as long as she took another step back, she would face an overwhelming terrorist attack. If you escape, you will die now. The sharp tone was mixed with countless sounds, which made Suli's eardrums hurt. She no longer retreated, but turned around and flew to the water spout. The pressure on her body suddenly lightened, but she was not relaxed for a long time, and she was stared at by another more terrifying pressure. Boom! The dark clouds suddenly tumbled violently. Before Suli's flying knife and water spout, a bucket-thick purple thunderbolt fell. The power of this thunderbolt was more than twice as powerful as the one that struck Zishah's head before. I can't bear it. Su Li's face changed slightly. Without saying anything, she took out the tactical matrix for camouflage modified by Zishah's demon crystal and opened it. The purple thunderbolt struck on the protective shield of the tactical matrix, and a strong purple light appeared. The whole tactical matrix creaked as if it would explode in the next moment. However, the tactical matrix still held. Su Li breathed a sigh of relief, but Zishah's exasperated and frightened voice came from under her feet. This is the Purple Emperor, Supreme Thunder? You, what kind of monster are you? Bastard, my thunder for punishment. Su Li didn't know what the Purple Emperor Supreme Thunder was, but she also saw that the black cloud generated because of her gradually merged with Zishah's tribulation cloud. In the end, the tribulation cloud, which was originally flashing with blue electric arcs, was full of breathtaking purple. The terrifying power of destruction was brewing in the overwhelming thunder for punishment. Su Li looked at the core of the tactical matrix that was cracked into several halves in her hand. This tactical matrix for camouflage that had accompanied her for a year finally died of old age and could no longer be used. How to block the next blow? She looked up at the electric arcs and the thunder gathering. Her eyebrows almost knitted together. She couldn't escape forever, but at this moment, nature's punishment was obviously not going to give her a chance to think. After 3 breaths, boom, the purple thunder slanted down and drowned Su Li in the blink of an eye. It went straight into the water, and the lake crackled continuously. It instantly became a pool of thunder. Although Zishah hid in the depths of the lake, half of her body was still numb because of the purple thunder and lightning. Su Jiuzhou, damn you! Zishah gritted her teeth, moved her body with hatred, and stared at the purple sky. She never dreamed that Su Jiuzhou, the person who was jealous of by heaven, had a higher potential than her, so she attracted a more powerful thunder for punishment. The means she prepared were not enough to deal with it. But now, it was too late to say anything. Su Jiuzhou had been smashed into flying ashes, and even her ashes were scattered with the wind. Where does she go to take revenge? Suddenly, the rolling purple thunder in the sky quickly faded and became the original blue, and even the blue was much lighter than before. Zishah was stunned and immediately overjoyed. Insufficient nimbus. Insufficient nimbus. The nimbus in this area was too thin, and the natural law had no time to mobilize too much nimbus to turn into thunder in a short time. The blow that killed Su Jiuzhou just now was too strong, which directly led to the decline of her thunder power. Ha ha! Su Jiuzhou. Zishah couldn't help laughing excitedly. Her delicate face suddenly twisted and turned into a huge snake head. Only the pair of purple eyes still glowed with the familiar feeling. Whoosh! The red lake water overflowed to the shore, and Zishah rushed out of the water. Her body finally appeared. Her head was held high, and her body full of strange patterns and scales convulsed. Layers of skin fell into the lake. She didn't need to treat the thunder for punishment whose power was reduced by 1 level. Dark clouds rolled, boom, boom. More than a dozen thunderbolts struck down one after another. The snake scales were flying, and the blood was dripping. Zishah's roar constantly echoed in the lake. Although the thunder for punishment was no longer a concern, she had reached the end of her snake shedding at this moment, which was the weakest time. Although the thunder for punishment could not hurt her seriously, it still brought her some pain. The dark sky gradually became clear, and the dark clouds dispersed. Until the last thunderbolt fell, there was no abnormality. Zishah was finally relieved. She looked up and enjoyed the long-lost warm sunshine. Suddenly, a golden light shuttled through quickly. The exposed flesh of Zishah's snake body was drilled, and a blood hole as big as a wash basin appeared. Hiss! The sharp pain attacked her nerves. Zishah raised her head and roared. She opened her bloody mouth to bite the golden light, but the speed of the golden light accelerated again. It narrowly escaped being bitten by Zishah. The blood was rolling, and Zishah quickly coiled up. Her snake eyes stared at the golden light going away. Finally, it fell beside an elegant scholar with a smile and turned into a golden mummy. It seems that I came at the right time. Chapter 480. The Corpse Control Method of the Corpse Refining School. Zisha's huge snake head was raised high. She looked down at Su Zhuanyin with a gloomy gaze. It turns out to be the little bastard of the Su family. Su Zhuanyin suddenly stretched out his hand, and the golden corpse immediately turned into an afterimage. The second half of Zisha's sentence was directly strangled in her throat. Although you are a mighty demon who has lived for countless years, but this trick of delaying time is too low-end. Not to mention me, any practitioner with a little bit of insight can easily see the flaws. Su Zhuanyin's tone was neither fast nor slow, but his 10 fingers moved flexibly and turned into an afterimage. On each fingertip, there was a transparent silk thread that spread to the nothingness. Every time the silk thread trembled, the golden corpse dodged every attack of Zisha like a living person and looked for a gap to leave a wound on the snake's body. The pale red lake water smelled fishy, and the color became more and more intense. The giant snake roared and was furious, but it had no way to deal with the golden corpse. The minor injuries on its body gradually evolved into serious injuries over time. Zisha thought that her speed was not slow, but the speed of the golden corpse was obviously faster. It was so fast that it even exceeded the limit of nature's test and reached the extreme of Deshang realm. Su Zhuanyin himself only had the cultivation of the early stage of nature's test. It was all because of the golden corpse. Hiss! Roar! Human clan, damn it! Her eyes, which were as huge as copper tombs, reflected a monstrous fury. She twisted her body and slapped the lake water, raising a huge wall of water. In the next instant, a golden light flashed, and the wall of water was neatly cut into 8 pieces and fell into the lake. The mighty demon can't hold on any longer. If Su Zhuanyin succeeds, why hasn't the master appeared yet? Outside the forest, Suchinka saw this scene worriedly. He was so anxious that he wanted to rush into the forest. Suddenly, a white and slender hand gently rested on his shoulder. Suchinka's scalp was numb, and he subconsciously wanted to fight back to defend himself. But when he saw the appearance of Su Jiuzhou next to him, he suddenly felt relieved. He wiped the sweat on his forehead and said, "Master, don't worry, it's not time yet." Su Li waved her hand and calmly looked at the mythical battle scene in the distance. She said with a smile, "Although your brother has the golden armored corpse refined by the holy method of the sect, he underestimates the mighty demon who has lived for countless years." Suchinko was shocked, and his face changed. "Sir, you mean?" Boom! Before he could open his mouth, an explosion suddenly sounded in his ears, followed by a violent hurricane that swept through the entire forest. Countless towering trees were snapped in half and swept into the sky by the violent wind. At this time, a figure flew out of the forest and turned into a stream of light, shooting straight at Suchinka's feet. Ha! Suchinka's pupils suddenly contracted. He only saw that the golden corpse bombarded the mountain rock, which was not hard, but it was smashed like a rotten tomato. Seeing the destructive state of the golden corpse, Suchinka had an opportune thought in his mind. So our Su family's trump card, the holy corpse, is black inside. With a shudder, he looked up and saw the ripples reflected in the nothingness. A pair of smooth feet stepped in the high sky of the forest. Every time she took a step, the distance under her feet would instantly shorten by hundreds of meters. Supernatural power, shrinking distance. Suchinka looked at the sky in horror. He turned his head and was about to say something to Su Li, but he found that Su Li had already disappeared in place. Su Zhuanyin fled desperately with his sword in horror. The blood in his mouth kept gushing out as if it was free. Giggle. "Little guy, didn't you fight very happily just now? Why are you running?" Hearing the charming voice behind him, Su Zhuanyin patted his chest fiercely without saying a word. He spat out a big mouthful of blood into the flying sword, and the speed was faster. Just now, he controlled the golden corpse and finally killed the giant snake. But he didn't expect that a pair of hands suddenly stretched out from the ordinary nothingness. With just a gentle slap, his life-bonded golden corpse, which he had spent thousands of years to refine, was turned into a pile of minced meat. If this slap happened to him, just thinking about it, Su Zhuanyan shuddered. The culprit who made this slap was chasing him at the moment. Senior, I didn't mean to offend you. I was also deceived by others, so I did such a disrespectful thing to you. If he died this time, everything he had cultivated for thousands of years would be gone. He transmitted the sound in fear. At this moment, the dignity of the old ancestor of the Su family was all left behind. As long as Senior is willing to spare my life, I will definitely catch the messenger in front of you, cut him into pieces, and torture him to death. This Junior is even more willing to be your servant, to worship you for generations to come, to respect you as my lord. As soon as he finished speaking, the coquettish and beautiful face behind him suddenly opened her mouth. The small cherry mouth instantly cracked to the ears, and it expanded dozens of times in the wind. She swallowed Su Zhuanyan in one gulp. Crack, crack, crack. After a chewing sound that made people's teeth ache, Zisha's pale face finally recovered a little ruddy, and her mind was slightly relaxed. The counterattack just now was not easy for her. Fortunately, Su Zhuanyan did not escape too far. Otherwise, Zisha took a deep look at the direction of Lei Yuan's sect, which was the nearest to the Su family, and turned around to return. Suddenly, Zisha's footsteps stopped. She looked down and saw the bloody palm inserted in her chest. Her face changed wildly, and she opened her mouth to spit red blood. She didn't care that her heart was pulled out by the hand, and she flashed back. When she saw the person behind her, her face was completely gloomy. Su Jiuzhou. Her thoughts turned very fast. At the moment when Su Li appeared, she figured out the ins and outs. She was actually schemed by this weak human. Puff! Su Li stretched out her hand and pulled hard. After breaking the blood vessels connected to the heart, she sent them to Black Lotus Ring for sealing. After finishing this step, Su Li looked up at Zisha, who looked paler, and said with a smile, Senior, it's impolite not to reciprocate. Since you are not ready to let me live, if I show mercy, won't I look down on you? Zisha stared at Su Li as if she knew her for the first time. Her eyes were no longer coercion and contempt, but equality. Su Jiuzhou. She calmed down, took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice, You are a smart person. You should understand that my means can't be forced by Su Zhuanyan. Why do you and I have a life and death struggle? I deceived you, and you also got my heart, which caused my strength to be greatly reduced. In this way, you and I are even. I'll make a demon oath that I will not seek revenge from you after this disaster, and you will not plot against me again. How about it? Su Li bowed her head and pondered for a moment. She raised her head and smiled warmly. There was no murderous intention on her face. Senior Zisha, I have to say that your proposal is very tempting. Zisha was slightly relieved, but before she spoke, her face suddenly changed, and she looked in the direction of the lake. A newborn great demon. But Su Li gently approached Zisha. As she moved her fingers, golden thunderbolts appeared out of thin air, which instantly turned into a cage and enveloped Zisha. I still have a little guy to feed. If you can give up your flesh and blood, we are even. Zisha's eyes suddenly turned red. That was the essence she had accumulated for thousands of years. It was her foundation. If it was swallowed, she could not survive at all. You are going too far. Zisha's face was ferocious. She reached out to grab the golden thunderbolt. When her palm touched the holy thunder, it was immediately burned with a sizzling sound. But she didn't seem to feel it. As she screamed, she turned into a pocket-sized snake body, and her tail slammed on the thunder cage. The booming sound resounded through the sky. A small part of the golden cage collapsed, and a purple light pierced Su Li's chest like lightning. Crack! The sound of glass breaking rang in her ears. At the same time, the purple light also seemed to be repelled by an unknown force. It turned back to its original body with bruises all over. Suli was stunned, and then she was horrified. She took out the life-saving magic ball that she got from Suchinka in her arms, and then saw that the round magic ball suddenly had countless cracks and collapsed into nothingness. The law of universe. Haha, even the heaven is helping you. Zisha laughed miserably when she saw the broken magic ball. No, the heaven will only hope that I die early. Suli replied faintly. Even if Zisha was an arrow at the end of its flight, she only replenished the thunder cage from a distance. In front of a desperate situation, Zisha calmed down. She stared at Suli, who was always as calm as ice, and her hair fluttered wildly. Am not wrong. This is the way of the world. I don't want to kill people, but they want to kill me all the time. Fortunately, I will kill enough. You human clan are all greedy and selfish people. I am defeated. I am defeated. I have nothing to say. I can see that you and I are the same kind of people. One day, you will be schemed to death by others like me. Ha ha! Golden thunderbolts struck down and smashed Zisha's body into a piece of charcoal, but it didn't stop. Suli looked at Zisha quietly and said. She laughed wildly and was desperate until there was no vitality. She kept silent. She was terribly calm. After a while, she suddenly said, Zisha, it's useless to pretend to be dead. After the voice, there was no movement. Suli narrowed her eyes slightly. She simply removed the cage and approached Zisha. Master, don't. Black Lotus's heart tightened. He saw the heart in the ring space suddenly beat slightly. Before he had time to remind Suli, the pitch-black corpse suddenly split into hundreds of thousands of small snakes. They opened their mouths and showed their sharp teeth to bite Suli. Suli grinned. I know you can't help it. Wuyo. Before she finished her words, an amazing chill came from behind. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thousands of small snakes were all frozen. Ow woo woo. The little white fox rushed out of Suli's arms and broke the all-spirits jade rune on its body. A strong pneuma of a mighty demon came. At the same time, a statue of the little white fox next to the lake was broken. The ice demon had been hiding in Suli's arms all the time. Whoosh! The ice flower was broken and condensed into Zisha's appearance again. But compared with Zisha before, she was more petite, and her face was pale and almost transparent. Cough! Zisha covered her chest and coughed. Blood spilled from the corner of her mouth. She looked at Suli with amazement. I rarely admire human clan. You are very... Zisha suddenly opened her mouth and spat out a green poisonous fog, which instantly enveloped Suli. Chapter 481. Master. Black Lotus ring vibrated violently. His worry finally became a reality. The trick that Zisha used until now couldn't be ordinary snake venom. Could Suli withstand it? Zisha's dim pupils had a glimmer of hope. As soon as the green poisonous mist appeared, it corroded the nothingness and corroded all Suli's clothes into nothingness in the blink of an eye. But that was all. Suli stood in the nothingness without any clothes. Her slender and white body was looming in the mist. Her white skin glowed in the green mist. Zisha held her breath. Useless. Is this your last resort? Suli tilted her head and smiled. Her long hair danced in the wind like splashing ink. Such a beautiful picture was no different from a devil in her eyes. It's really disappointing, Suli said. She twisted the wind with her fingertips and compressed the green poisonous mist into a ball. Then she sealed it in the bottle. Nice poison. I'll accept it. Zisha stared at Suli in a daze. Countless scenes from her childhood flashed in her mind. The glory when the demon clan was established and the struggle when the demon clan was exiled flashed in her mind. Finally, a bitter and relieved smile appeared on her face. Alas, after that, her body disappeared with the wind. That ball of life-bound poison was all she had. Suli looked at the green glass bottle in her hand. After a moment of silence, she took out a set of clothes from the universe ring and put them on. The little white fox cheered and rushed to the lake where Zisha's real body was. After swallowing Zisha's real body, it would inevitably grow rapidly in a short time and even transform. It was much easier for a born great demon to transform than a great demon from the demon clan. Master, you killed Zisha and turned the tide. Aren't you happy? Black Lotus felt a trace of emotion revealed by Su Li and couldn't help but ask cautiously. Happy? Should I be happy? Su Li murmured in a low voice. It seemed to be an answer, but it was more like she was saying it to herself. In order to survive, Zisha had to find an opportunity to shed her skin. In order to survive, she also had to kill Zisha to eliminate future troubles. She couldn't speak without being crazy. There was no absolute right or wrong in this world. She didn't hate Zisha. Now that Zisha died in her hands, there was nothing to be happy about. Worryless, Su Li called softly. Suddenly, a white shadow shot out from the lake and landed on her shoulder. Woo-woo. The little white fox's bright big eyes were full of ignorance and doubt, and it seemed to feel that Su Li's mood was not high. Su Li glanced at the empty lake and didn't know where the little white fox hid Zisha's body. She gently touched the little white fox's soft and furry head and flew away. Farewell, mister. On the ground, Suchinka knelt down and bowed deeply. His eyes were full of morbid fanaticism. Even a great demon could not escape the fate of death in the hands of its master. Suchinka, I swear to be loyal to master. Half a day later, Su Li returned to the adytum of the Forbidden Land in the back mountain of an ice sect, as if nothing had happened. The news of Su Zhuanyan's death did not spread. Only Suchinka knew it. It was easy for Suchinka to secretly become the only master of the Su family. Su Li didn't bother to pay attention to those trivial things. There was no doubt about Suchinka's loyalty. The only thing she needed to care about now was the effect of reincarnation mirror to suppress her pneuma. After all, after she came out of the ancestral land of the Ghost Clan, her strength was greatly improved, and the pneuma of the body of Evil Ghost was stronger. If reincarnation mirror could not completely cover her pneuma, the consequences would be very troublesome. For this reason, Su Li specially spent time to do a test with her external incarnation. The disciples of an Eye sect clearly felt that the thunder around the sect this month was very frequent. It was said to be a strange phenomenon from the sky, but there was no sign of any treasure appearing in the world. As time went by, no one cared about it anymore. Hua Yin, Yin Zai, and others just felt strange, but they didn't think it was Su Li. In their eyes, although Su Li was powerful, she couldn't reach the level of nature's test. What's more, the flashing thunder outside was not like the thunder of nature's test. 3 months later, the Su family experienced a bloody purge and completely fell into the control of Suchinka. Su Li's test finally came out. In the forbidden land of the back mountain, Su Li stood on a bare mountain that had been struck by thunder for nature's test. Watching the last external incarnation being smashed in the thunder, she sighed softly. Reincarnation mirror was too broken. Even if the fragments snatched from Han's sect were completely digested, it didn't reach 10% completeness. The effect of shielding the natural law was extremely limited. For this reason, Su Li had to find a way from the demon crystal left by Zisha. It took her 3 months to remake a matrix rune with a demon crystal that surpassed the 11th grade. The materials used were all the top grade of the grand secret of Han's sect. But the result of the test was just satisfactory. It allowed her to burst out 60% of her strength without being noticed by the natural law. If the release of strength exceeded 60%, the blue nature's test would quickly gather like a shark smelling the fish. If the release of strength exceeded 80%, the blue nature's test would turn into purple Emperor Extreme Thunder as it did against Zisha. Su Li had to send 1 or even 2 external incarnations to completely offset the nature's test. And if she completely burst out 100% of her strength, the purple thunder would turn into a black thunder snake that she had never seen before. The power of the thunder for nature's test was far greater than that of purple Emperor Extreme Thunder. It reached a level that Su Li couldn't understand at all. For this, Su Li sacrificed 10 external incarnations. Master, even if you collected a lot of ghosts and souls in the ancestral land, you shouldn't waste them like this. Seeing Su Li in silence, Black Lotus sighed. Those were the fine souls carefully collected by the Ghost Clan for hundreds of thousands of years. They were wasted like this. Sully glanced at Black Lotus and didn't speak. The waste of external incarnations was necessary. The plan she was going to implement next must be supported by strength. She couldn't count on the fragments of the ancestral land of the Ghost Clan to save her every time, or another mighty demon would disturb the order of the natural law, so that she could take advantage of the loopholes. When the ancestral land of the Ghost Clan collapsed, she collected a lot of fragments and hid them in the space around her to reduce consumption. But she could feel that the power of those fragments of the world that had lost their core was fading rapidly with time. Maybe it would be completely ineffective in a few years. Every time she used it, it would accelerate the disappearance of the fragments. Moreover, in order to scare off the Grand Elder of Han's sect who chased after her last time, she had already used 90% of the fragments. She would be thankful if the remaining fragments could kill a senior of the Shang realm. Sully took a deep breath. The light in her eyes flowed, and her calculation became deeper. She understood it very well. Such strength and foundation were far from enough to fight against Yushu's sect. However, if the immortal tea plant died, her chances would undoubtedly be smaller. There was not much time left. "Master, are you back?" In the forest, the bell rang, and Yin Zai's voice came into her ears. Sully collected her thoughts and disappeared in a flash. When she reappeared, she was already in front of Yin Zai. Yin Zai had long been accustomed to his master's mysterious way of appearing and disappearing. He immediately said respectfully, "Master, something happened to the second branch of the Su family. Su Chinka has gone to deal with it." "What happened?" "Su Wenbing is dead." Yin Zai's voice was slightly low. Sully suddenly raised her eyebrows. An hour later, in the lobby where the second branch of the Su family was located, the atmosphere was solemn. Ling Qinglan, Su Dain, Su Xianyan, and others were all there. Sully squatted down and lifted the white cloth on the ground. Su Wenbing's pale face came into view. There was not much panic on his face, but more relief and shame. She lifted the white cloth further, but she saw a mass of rotten flesh below his neck. It seemed that he was cut and smashed by extremely sharp golden air. His corpse was not intact. Sully narrowed her eyes, put down the white cloth, stood up, and looked at Ling Qinglan. Ling Qinglan understood and shook his head regretfully. "I was careless." Jindao cult suddenly attacked Dain. If this guy didn't block the attack, Sully glanced at Su Dain, who was pale and lost in thought while looking at Su Wenbing's corpse. Then she waved to Ling Qinglan, "Let's go out and talk." Ling Qinglan nodded and left with Sully first. Although he had a strong intuition that Su Jiuzhou was Sully every time, he could control his emotions and no longer leak them. "Tell me the ins and outs." Standing on the edge of the cliff, Ling Qinglan followed Sully. When he heard the question, he said with a complicated expression, "Su Dain's origin is related to Jindao cult, and the master of Jindao cult wants to kill her as soon as possible. After Su Zhuanyan died, Jindao cult wanted to kill her. That's why there was such a thrill. I also found this out later. Before Su Wenbing died, he revealed that he was the illegitimate son of Su Dingxian. In the lobby, Su Dain took a deep breath, walked to the white cloth, and squatted down. She stretched out her hand and touched the white cloth. Then she withdrew her hand as if she was electrocuted. Yesterday's events kept flashing in her mind. The golden blades were like flying flowers all over the sky, but they were all blocked by Su Wenbing behind him. Su Dain stared at Su Wenbing in a daze. Su Wenbing showed a painful look, but he was still smiling at her. His bloody hands grasped her tightly, and his voice was choked with sobs. "After my father asked me to worship you as my master, there was no news from me for hundreds of years. Master, I dare not forget your kindness. I thought I would never go back to that hell in my life, but I can't disobey my father's order. No matter how he treats me, he is still my father. Master, I'm sorry. I've done something wrong. I'm going to repent in hell. Master, take care. Silly boy, Su Dingxian is not worthy of your life. What did he treat you as his son? It's my fault. If I can find out. Su Dian's voice was hoarse and choked. Su Xianyun and Su Zheng stood behind. Their eyes were red and moist, and they grasped the swords in their hands tightly. They didn't feel the pain of the third junior fellow apprentice before, but it was too late now. Step, step, step. Suddenly, footsteps sounded. Su Dian raised her head and saw Su Li and Ling Qinglan coming. She was confused, but Su Li suddenly smiled and said to her in a relaxed tone, Su Dian, are you interested in being the master of Jindao cult? Chapter 482. Although Jindao cult ranked at the bottom of the 25 sects, it was also one of the 25 sects, and its strength should not be underestimated. In the afternoon of the same day, Ling Qinglan secretly went to Jindao cult to investigate the situation, while Su Chinka stayed in the Su family to prevent the base camp from being invaded. Master, are you going to deal with Jindao cult? On the second day, Su Yang and Su Mu, who hadn't shown up for a long time, suddenly came. As soon as they met, Su Yang frowned and asked anxiously, Why? Can't I? Su Li looked at Su Yang and raised her eyebrows slightly. A pressure came out of nowhere. Of course, master. Su Yang's forehead was sweating, and his doubts and anxiety were instantly replaced by a kind of emotion called cowardice. Su Mu saw Su Yang's unbearable look. He shook his head slightly and said, Master, Tina Sek sent a message to us yesterday, asking what happened in the Su family. The news of Su Zhuanyan's death seems to have spread. Su Li slightly pursed her lips and said lightly, It's not surprising. After a few months, Su Chinka has made a lot of moves, and Jindao cult has been keeping an eye on it. If the news of Su Zhuanyan's death doesn't spread, I will feel strange. As soon as these words came out, both Su Yang and Su Mu were shocked. Su Zhuanyan really died in the hands of Su Jiuzhou. Even though the two of them had guessed it when Su Chinka cleared the Su family in a bloody way and deliberately let them go, they were still shocked when they heard the news. Although they had never been qualified to see Su Zhuanyan with their own eyes, he was also a mighty figure in nature's test. Even in Tina's sect, he was definitely a mainstay. In the era of no war, few people died. Tut! Su Yang couldn't help but be speechless. A few months ago, a grand elder of Junior Emperor died in Han's sect. Not long after, another mighty in nature's test died. Qingshui's circle is really getting more and more chaotic. He sighed with emotion and asked cautiously, Master, how should we reply to the inquiry of Tina's sect? Su Li looked at Su Yang until the latter's hair stood up. Then she turned her gaze and said indifferently, Don't let any holy sects come to Jiuzhou region within 10 years. Su Yang's pupils shrank, and his heart trembled slightly. Although he wanted to ask Su Jiuzhou why she did this, his reason and desire to survive still stopped him. In the end, he just nodded. Su Mu frowned and said hesitantly, Master, since Tiana's sect can send us to lurk in sects in Jiuzhou region, other holy sects are likely to place spies in other sections. If you want to deal with Jindao cult and don't want to spread the news, I'm afraid. Su Li was stunned for a moment. Then she gently nodded and said, You are right. It seems that my plan needs to be changed. You two have been in Jiuzhou region for many years. Have you contacted other holy sect spies? Su Yang's expression was slightly stiff. He subconsciously wanted to deny it, but Su Mu nodded and admitted it without hesitation, as if he was waiting for Su Li's question. Very good. Su Li glanced at Su Yang, who looked uneasy and revealed a meaningful smile. She said softly, The matter of the Su family has been settled. You don't have to stay in the Su family anymore. In the next year, I don't care what you do, try to find out the specific identity of those spies and report it to me. Can you do it? Su Mu's expression was solemn. He stood straight and his voice resounded. I will live up to your expectations. Ha ha. Su Li laughed softly and waved her hand. Then her figure shattered and disappeared like a bubble. Blockhead. After Su Li left, Su Yang immediately wanted to ask, but Su Mu reached out to cover his mouth. Seeing Su Mu shook his head seriously, Su Yang was a little confused. He didn't understand why Su Mu had to listen to Su Jiuzhou. Obviously, it was not necessary. Although the two of them became traitors and joined Su Jiuzhou, it was just an expedient strategy to survive in the Chaos Zone. Did this blockhead take it seriously? Let's go. Since Master said so, we will set off immediately. Su Mu glanced at the direction where Su Li left. He picked up Su Yang's back with one hand and left the second branch in a few flashes. Shortly after the two of them left, Su Chunka, who was hiding in the dark, appeared and calmly dispelled the gesture in his hand. Su Mu flew all the way with Su Yang until they landed on a flat plain. With a gloomy face, Su Yang broke away from Su Mu's hand and scolded angrily. "Blockhead, have you been kicked in the head by a donkey? You even told Su Jiuzhou about your past. What kind of magic potion did Su Jiuzhou give you to make you answer every question? If she asks about us, are you going to shut up?" The anger in Su Mu's eyes flashed away, and he stopped Su Yang from saying the second half of the sentence. "Well, I'd like to hear what reason you can make up this time to convince me." Su Yang took a deep breath, crossed his hands in front of his chest, and stared at Su Mu with bulging eyes. It seemed that he would part ways if Su Mu didn't agree with him. Su Jiuzhou wants to unify the Jiuzhou region. Su Mu's eyes flickered, and the first sentence made Su Yang's expression change dramatically. "What?" Su Mu raised his head and squinted at Su Yang. "She doesn't mean to deliberately hide it from us, but she wants to hide it from holy sects. If we want to leave, we can imagine the consequences." Su Yang reached out to cover his chest, which was faintly suffocating, and his face was full of disbelief. "How is this possible? Su Jiuzhou's NI sect is just a small sect, based on those repulsive people. Now, the Su family also belongs to Su Jiuzhou." Su Mu interjected leisurely, and Su Yang suddenly stopped talking. "Even if Su Jiuzhou's next goal is Jin Dao cult, how do you know that she wants to control the Jiuzhou region? Maybe she just wants to avenge Su Dain. After all, her relationship with Su Dain." Speaking of this, Su Yang froze, and his voice stopped abruptly. He suddenly remembered that the relationship between Su Jiuzhou and Su Dain was simply planned by Su Jiuzhou. Could there be feelings in such a relationship? Seeing that he finally understood, Su Mu continued, "If we refuse, Su Chinka will immediately kill us in the cradle. Maybe she won't kill in order not to alarm Tiana's sect, but do you want to be like Su Chinka?" Su Yang couldn't help but shiver and immediately shook his head. "So we have no choice. It turns out to be like this." Su Yang looked at the Jinwu in the sky, which was not very bright, and suddenly turned back with a pale smile. "Su Mu, my brain is really not as good as yours. Do you particularly dislike me? If not." Su Mu's cold face showed a slight fluctuation, but it soon calmed down, just like a leaf thrown into a calm lake, which only caused a ripple. But there was something more in the lake after all. "I never dislike you. I just want to kill you. So, the stupider you are, the better." After Su Mu finished speaking, he turned around and left. Su Yang laughed, "So, I'm relieved." Hearing him laughing behind, Su Mu raised his lips imperceptibly, but it was soon replaced by coldness. There was one more thing that he hid from Su Yang. Although it was his guess, he dared not tell anyone. The will of ice that he understood was extremely sensitive to some things, such as the ice demon that made a big scene in the ghost region. On a green grassland by the lake in the back mountain of an ice sect, Su Li lay down and stared at the blue sky in a daze. The little white fox squinted and took a nap beside her. It made a murmur from time to time, as if it was dreaming. The little black cat, which was transformed by the nightmare, stared at the little white fox and kept devouring dreams with a satisfied face. It enjoyed itself very much. Su Li suddenly felt a little sleepy when the warm but indescribable sunshine shone on her. With her physique, she would definitely not be affected by the light, but she was intoxicated by herself. These days, she broke into the ghost region, entered the ancestral land of the ghost clan, and killed the grand elder of Han's sect and the mighty demon Zisha. Although she gained a lot, she was too nervous. She needed to rest before fighting against the 25 sections, even if it was only for a moment. She squinted and looked at the lush mountains, rivers, and forests in the distance, and gradually fell asleep. After a long time, the approaching breath of Hua Yin woke her up. Didn't she dream? She straightened up and looked at the innocent nightmare beside her. She looked slightly serious. Black, you're a good girl, right? The little body of the nightmare shivered. It opened its mouth aggrievedly and spat out a ball. Suli took the dream ball with a smile. This little guy became bold and even dared to devour her dream. Suli, you are here. I have been looking for you for a long time. At this moment, Hua Yin came in a hurry, and her breath was a little unstable. When she saw Suli lying comfortably on the grass, she couldn't help but be amused. She pretended to be angry and said, "Wow, I am running around for you outside, but you are lazing around here." After a while, Hua Yan's smile disappeared, but there was still a smile in her eyes. The spy of Jindao cult has news. Oh, so fast, Suli said in surprise. She originally thought that if she couldn't find the spy in Jindao cult, she would go to Jindao cult in person, but now it was not necessary. Yes. Hua Yan nodded and said, "It's a coincidence that the spy in Jindao cult has some relationship with Yin Zai." Yin Zai went to investigate a little and recognized the person. Is he from Void Sword sect? Suli rubbed the surface of Black Lotus Ring and thought about it. In the previous life, she died very cleanly, and the reincarnation mirror had been completely destroyed. Why did those holy sects still put spies in these small sects? Was it possible that someone already knew that she was still alive? As soon as this speculation appeared, Suli shook her head and extinguished it. It was impossible. If they knew that she was reborn, they would not be so calm now. That is, someone predicted that something noteworthy would happen in Jiuzhou region, but they didn't know it was me. Or could it be that the thing that people care about isn't me? All kinds of thoughts hovered in Suli's mind. Hua Yan stood aside and did not disturb her. Instead, she looked at Suli's beautiful face in contemplation with a smile on her face. If she could, she would rather practice quietly with Suli all the time, but she also knew very well that it was impossible. It was too unfair for Suli to give up hatred. Chapter 483. Senior Fellow Apprentice Yin, it's really you. In an inn in a small cultivation town at the foot of the Jindao cult, Yin Shishuan looked at Yin Zai with surprise in his eyes. He had lurked in the Jindao cult for thousands of years. As a price, the Void Sword sect also let him enter the reincarnation mirror and got a good opportunity. But after all, he was not a genius cultivated by the Void Sword sect. On the day when the reincarnation mirror was broken, no one saved him. All the memories of what happened in the reincarnation mirror had long disappeared, and only some mental methods he learned in the reincarnation mirror were left in his mind. Naturally, he didn't remember that the role he played in the reincarnation mirror would be Yin Zai's father, the governor of the Han country and the governor of Qinghe province. He only remembered that Yin Zai was famous and talented in the Void Sword sect. As long as it was a disciple in the sect, there was not a single one who did not admire him. He was even sure that Yin Zai would be the next sect master. But no one expected that Yin Zai disappeared soon after he came back from the reincarnation mirror. Yin Zai saw Yin Shishuan's surprised expression, and his expression was quite strange. Although he knew that many things happened in the reincarnation mirror were illusions, he still couldn't ignore it. Senior Fellow Apprentice, where have you been all these years? Yin Shishuan looked at Yin Zai as if he had found someone to talk to. His aloofness as an elder of the Jindao cult all turned into loneliness. I haven't returned to the sect for hundreds of years. I don't know if my old friends still remember me. Yin Zai's eyes flashed, and he didn't answer his words. He said slowly, "In the eyes of those friends, you died 1,000 years ago." What? Yin Shishuan's mind suddenly shook, and his pupils shrank. Why? Yin Zai shook his head and smiled self-mockingly. For the sect, what are we? Even if it's me, if I can't become a junior emperor, I'm just a tool that can be thrown away at will. These you have been cultivating for many years, and you should know. It turns out that it's like this. Yin Shishuan looked more lonely, and the brilliance in his eyes because of meeting Yin Zai disappeared at this moment. Yin Zai looked at Yin Shishuan in silence. Although he was suspected of instigating defection, what he said was the truth. Those who were sent out by the Void Sword sect as spies would not end up well. The various benefits promised by the sect were just an illusion. Those who could really get that huge reward were very few. For people like Yin Shirshuan, who had been wandering outside for thousands of years, the higher-ups of the sect had long since lost trust in them. Even if they occasionally obtained information from them, they would join forces with other spies to repeatedly verify its authenticity. Yin Shirshuan shook the wine glass in his hand and suddenly laughed in a low voice. His voice sounded like sand, extremely sour. In the cultivation world, favors are the most valuable, but also the least valuable. I'm afraid that those who still remember me, Yin Shirshuan, can be counted with one hand. When Yin Zai heard this, he knew it was time. He pretended to be hesitant and said, "Do you want to go back and take a look?" Yin Shirshuan was instantly stunned, and then his expression changed. "Senior brother, do you have a way?" Yin Zai nodded with a smile, but then shook his head. "My identity is sensitive, so it's not good for me to take you back. However, there's an opportunity right now. If you seize it, you may be able to break through the shackles of the Void Sword sect and get a brighter path of cultivation." Yin Shirshuan's face changed slightly. Senior brother, he was not a fool to be a spy in other sects for so many years without being discovered. The meaning of Yin Zai's words made him shudder. Betray the sect? Don't worry. Yin Zai pressed Yin Shirshuan's trembling hands. You and I have the same surname, and I won't hurt you. I won't let you risk doing anything. As long as you do your part, leave the rest to me, your senior brother. My part? Yin Shirshuan's eyes were full of hesitation, but Yin Zai was not annoyed. He smiled lightly and pointed to the Jindao school. It's easy for you. Yin Shirshuan looked at the gate of the Jindao school in a daze. He still did not understand, but he soon understood. Bang! A purple streamer fell from the sky and slammed into the big tactical matrix for the protection of the Jindao school. Until the plaque of the main hall of the Jindao school was smashed into pieces, the original shape was revealed, a purple dagger. What's that? The main hall of our sect was smashed. What? Senior fellow apprentice, come out quickly. Something big happened. A huge roar resounded through the mountains. The main hall was destroyed, and all the disciples of the Jindao school were rioting. Not long after, Jin Jintian, the master of the Jindao school, flew out of the main hall aggressively with all the elders. Who dares to be presumptuous in my Jindao school? As soon as he finished speaking, a sweet female voice with a sneer sounded. It's me. The wind was dancing in the nothingness, and Su Dian's skirt was rustling. Her phoenix eyes were as cold as a knife, and her face was cold. Ling Qinglan followed her silently, keeping a low profile. It's you. Seeing Su Dian, Jin Jintian's eyes changed. The moment he opened his mouth, the sound waves turned into illusory golden knives and slashed at the nothingness. Judging from his action, he actually wanted to kill Su Dian immediately so that she had no chance to speak. Su Dian was not panicked, but smiled. First, uncle, are you so eager to let your niece die? While speaking, Ling Qinglan raised his head, revealing a plain face. He just took a step forward and waved his sleeve. Ding, 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 ding. Those incomparably sharp golden sabers were like eggs hitting a rock, collapsing one after another. Seeing this scene, both Jin Jintian and other elders of the Jindao school showed a look of horror. This person was definitely not in the Huashan realm. Didn't Jin Jintian say that after Su Zhuanyan, the Su family would have no backer? Why did a mighty in nature's test come out and protect Su Dian? For a time, the elders panicked, but only an old man in a dark gray robe frowned tightly. He stared at Jin Jintian and questioned, She called you first, uncle. Is she Cheng Ao's daughter? Jin Jintian looked at Ling Qinglan, who looked indifferent, and his forehead was sweating. When he heard the old man's question, his face became even more ugly. He braced himself and said, Uncle, don't listen to this demon girl's nonsense. If I have a daughter, how can I let her be stranded outside? Ho ho ho. Seeing Jin Jintian's sophistry, Su Dian suddenly chuckled and said sarcastically, Old man, what first uncle said is right. After he learned that I was stranded outside, he couldn't wait to send someone with a knife to get close to me. You are the head of the second branch of the Su family, Su Dain. An elder didn't know the truth and recognized Su Dain's identity. He immediately shouted coldly, Su Dain, do you forget that the 25 sects in the Jojo region can't kill each other? Otherwise, it will cause all sects to attack together. Jin Jintian was suddenly refreshed when he heard the words. He bowed to Ling Qinglan and said eloquently, Senior, although I don't know what Su Dain promised you to make you help her like this, the iron law of the Jojo region can't be broken. If you insist on harming my sect, even with your cultivation, you will be doomed. Think twice. Jin Jintian said, while observing Ling Qinglan's reaction, hoping to see some information from his face, but he was disappointed. Ling Qinglan was always expressionless, as if he didn't hear what he said. Su Dain saw that Jin Jintian was still struggling, and she couldn't help but laugh very happily. I've been wandering outside since I was a child, fighting for food with wild dogs and clothes with beggars. If it weren't for my adoptive mother's kindness, there would be no Su Dain today. In recent days, there have been some changes in the Su family, which have nothing to do with my second branch. But I didn't expect that someone would take the opportunity to assassinate me. Thanks to this stab, I understand that my revenge has not been avenged. Jin Jintian, don't you want to get my father's practice method? I'll let you broaden your horizons. At the end of her words, Su Dain's face was suddenly full of killing intent. She pinched a gesture that made Ling Qinglan's face change abruptly. Go to hell. Swish, swish, swish. 3 flying swords shot out from the universe ring and rushed to Jin Jintian. Jin Jintian immediately took out a bell-shaped magic weapon to block the flying swords, but his face was much worse than if he didn't block the swords. The AO sword skills that he had been looking for was actually in the hands of Su Dain, and it was exposed at this moment. AO sword skills of Chung AO, this child. The elder in gray robe looked at Su Dain, who was full of killing intent. His lips trembled violently, and his old eyes were instantly wet. My granddaughter is still alive. This is the AO sword skills of the former lord. She is really the daughter of a lord. Many elders who didn't know were also shocked. The AO sword skills was the trump card of the former lord. The sword moves were strange and unpredictable. Every time it was used, there would be blood. But since the inexplicable death of the former lord, this sword skills had also been lost. Although Jin Jintian was Jin Chung, AO's brother, he did not inherit this sword skills. No one knew where the sword skills went. But today, there was finally an answer. And this answer was very unusual. For a time, many people looked at Jin Jintian in a strange way, and even many people distanced themselves from him and disassociated themselves from him. Others who did not disassociate themselves from Jin Jintian rolled their eyes and seemed to be looking for an escape route. Jin Jintian also wanted to escape, but the middle-aged man in linen with an ordinary face gave him too much pressure. He could barely resist the sword light that Su Dain constantly shot at him, but he could not take another step. However, even though he managed to defend the front, he was still able to release a cold sword beside him. Puff! The elder in gray robe fiercely inserted the flying sword into Jin Jintian's heart. His turbid old eyes were full of red, as if blood was about to drip out. You kill my daughter and your brother. Bastard, give me your life. Jin Jintian's eyes widened, and his blood splashed. He held the flying sword in his chest tightly, but the elder in gray robe put more strength in his hand. Su Dain saw the opportunity. She pointed with her fingertips, and a golden light broke the gap of the round bell and inserted into Jin Jintian's throat. Whoosh, blood gushed out like a fountain. Ho ho, I'm not reconciled. Jin Jintian covered his neck, and his body softened. He never expected that his momentary greed would bear such a consequence. Chapter 484. Clatter. Ling Qinglan frowned and loosened the invisible bondage, letting Jin Jintian's corpse fall in the square in front of the main hall of Jindao cult. The disciples who heard the noise and came over saw the corpse of their Lord. They instantly retreated far away and formed a large circle around the corpse. It was silent. The old man in a gray robe didn't look at Jean Gentien. He trembled and walked to Su Dayin. His wrinkled face was complicated. His lips were humming, but his voice was choked in his throat. He couldn't say anything. Uncle Lan, Su Dayin looked at Ling Qinglan. Since she learned Ling Qinglan's real name last time, she naturally changed her address. Even though Ling Qinglan had thousands of doubts in his heart at the moment, the old man in a gray robe was Su Dayin's grandfather. He didn't want to disturb his relatives when they met. Thinking of this, he retreated to the side with a heavy heart. He kept recalling the scene of Su Dayin performing the AO sword skills just now. He was absent-minded, but he didn't find that Jean Gentien's corpse below suddenly trembled slightly. Then an invisible, transparent soul rose from the corpse and turned into a flowing light. It flew out of the Jindao cult quietly. Porcelain method. It actually works. God doesn't want me to die. In the flight, Jean Gentien's consciousness woke up. Seeing the state at this time, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. As long as his soul was still there, it was possible to practice again. Su Dayin, you wait for me. If I don't avenge this, I swear not to be a man. Jean Gentien's transparent face looked ferocious. He controlled the soul to fly into the air. At this moment, a pair of white hands suddenly appeared. They easily passed through the space and grabbed Jean Gentien's soul. Then they pinched it out. Green smoke curled up. Ah! The harsh scream echoed in her ears, but Suli didn't seem to feel it. Jean Gentien and Jean Sheng, AO, are brothers. It turns out that the inheritance of the AO sword skills I snatched in the reincarnation mirror is rooted here. Jean Sheng AO's daughter is under my command. Suli showed a touch of interest. It was a coincidence, but it didn't surprise her. At that time, there were 100,000 practitioners who entered the reincarnation mirror. Although more than half of them died 1,000 years ago, those who stayed became the mainstay of various sections. As long as she wanted to get to the bottom of it, she would constantly meet those familiar but strange old friends, which was unavoidable. Jean Gentien and Jean Sheng Ao were just the most ordinary ones among those people. However, the porcelain method mentioned by Jean Gentien aroused a little interest in her. Even though ordinary soul formation cultivators had formed their primordial spirits and were protected by the power of intent realm, their primordial spirits were still too weak compared to their physical bodies. If the physical body was destroyed, the primordial spirit would not be able to hide and would collapse along with the physical body. However, Jean Gentien was different. He could actually regenerate his soul from his primordial spirit and escape without anyone noticing. If it weren't for the fact that he was guarding outside and his divine sense had keenly sensed the fluctuation, perhaps Jean Gentien would have really escaped and escaped. Senior Ling, please bring back Jean Gentien's corpse. Ling Qinglan suddenly heard Su Li's voice transmission, and his thoughts were suddenly interrupted. He looked at Jean Gentien's corpse that was completely silent below and wondered why Su Li still wanted the corpse. But at this moment, he didn't have much time to think about it. He just fell down and took back the spiritual dagger that was smashed into the hall. Then he put Jean Gentien's corpse into the universe ring. This action immediately aroused the dissatisfaction of the people of Jindao cult. The old man in a gray robe immediately flew over and cupped his fists. Fellow practitioner, I am Mo Lin. I am Dayin's grandfather. Thanks to your care and protection over the years, Dayin can grow up safely. But let me be thick-skinned and say that although this beast makes me want to cut him into pieces, he is the former head of Jindao cult after all. If you collect his corpse... Ling Qinglan's eyes were cold, and Su Dayin knew something was wrong. She quickly said, Uncle Lan, don't be impatient. My grandfather is also for the reputation of Jindao cult. So, seeing Su Dayin, Ling Qinglan's expression eased a little, but his voice was still very cold. The corpse will be returned in a few days. I just collected on behalf of Dayin to pay tribute to her parents and Su Wenbing. At the same time, he transmitted the sound to Su Dayin Su Jiuzhou wants this corpse. I'm afraid there is something strange about it. Su Dayin was stunned. She suddenly fell silent and stopped persuading. Mo Lin was old and shrewd, and he also saw some clues. His old face immediately eased, and he no longer insisted. In this case, it is reasonable. Fellow practitioner, you don't have to worry about it. He could see that it was absolutely impossible to ask this person a hand over Jin Jintian's corpse. He wanted the corpse back for the sake of the face of Jin Dao cult. Now Ling Qinglan could put down his pride to explain, which was a great show of respect. After all, this was a mighty practitioner in nature's test. Their Jin Dao cult didn't have one, and it had always been ranked at the bottom of the 25 sections. Now Su Dayin decided to return to Jin Dao cult as the head of Jin Dao cult. Maybe he could still take advantage of her. Mo Lin's mind became active, and the more he thought about it, the brighter the future was. Jin Jintian died so well. Shurshuan, as you can see, what happened in Jin Dao cult is just a family feud. What happened in the Jin Dao gate is just a family grudge. You only need to report to the sect, and you won't be punished. In the square of the main hall below, Yin Zai said with a smile. Yin Shurshuan looked at the sky above the sect in a daze. In just half a day, Jin Dao cult had changed, and even the head of the sect had changed. If Yin Zai didn't come to him, he might still think that things were as he saw, but now he seemed to see a huge whirlpool, and he was caught in it, thinking that he had been struggling alone in Jin Dao cult all these years, and Void Sword sect had no intention to have any relationship with him, and even turned him into a dead man. He took a deep breath and looked at Yin Zai. Senior fellow apprentice, what do I need to pay attention to? Yin Zai suddenly smiled when he heard the words, and pointed to Ling Qinglan. Su Dayin recognized her ancestors and returned to the sect. Jin Jintian died in Mo Lin's sneak attack. As for this person, don't appear in your report. Of course, there's also me. Yin Shurshuan felt cold in his heart. Senior fellow apprentice, for whom are you? Yin Zai's smile faded slightly. Do you really want to know? Yin Shurshuan opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything. In the past years, could anyone who went against the holy sects have a good end? Don't worry, there's still a long time. Think about it. Yin Zai saw his hesitation and immediately chuckled and patted him on the shoulder. This time, I will do you a little favor. If the sect investigates in the future, you can also blame it on negligence. Don't worry. Yin Shurshuan breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this sentence and nodded. A few days later, on the punishment platform of Jin Dao cult, heads rolled and blood stained the ground. Su Dayin looked cold and ferocious, but her eyes were full of tears. These elders who had conspired with Jin Jintian to kill her parents were finally sent to the netherworld by her own hands. Half a month later, the storm of Jin Dao cult completely subsided under Su Li's deliberate control. Jin Dao cult also returned to the right track under the management of Su Dayin. However, the news that Jin Dao cult changed its head quickly spread to the ears of every lord of the 25 sects as if it had wings. What's wrong with Jiuzhou region recently? First, the old grand elder of Su family died inexplicably, and then Jin Jintian also died unluckily. It's really unlucky. Tut-tut, these two facts can be summed up as one thing. Su Dayin was originally a member of Jin Dao cult. If Jin Jintian hadn't been greedy, he wouldn't have suffered today. I think it's weird. It's not as simple as we think. Yes, we must send someone to investigate. How can there be so many conspiracies? Those holy sects are much more well-informed than us. Even they didn't take any action, so there must be nothing serious. Many high-level officials of the 25 sects insisted on their own opinions. Although most people felt that this matter didn't need to be concerned, Hua Yin clearly noticed that there were more spies in Su family and Jin Dao cult. Fortunately, Su Li had already told them not to make any big moves recently. After those spies were restless for dozens of days, their enthusiasm almost subsided and they left one after another. At this moment, in the adytum of the back mountain of an ice sect, Su Li closed a booklet made of unknown materials and was lost in thought. Then in the faint light, She could vaguely see the words porcelain method printed on the booklet. This booklet was made of golden silk with a history of no more than 1,000 years. The escape method described in it should be based on the reincarnation mirror's natal porcelain. Burn Mushue, spiritual jade, as a jade porcelain magic weapon and store a trace of soul in it. If one day she was killed, she could retain her soul and seek a chance of survival. Logically speaking, the soul guided by Mushue, spiritual jade, couldn't be perceived by practitioners. But Su Li's divine awareness was too keen. Ordinary practitioners couldn't find it, but it didn't mean that she couldn't find it. What's more, the natal porcelain refined by Jin Jintian was not perfect. Mushue, spiritual jade, was a rare treasure that could refine the second natal body. Perhaps the purity of the spiritual jade obtained by Jin Jintian could barely meet the refining requirements, and he couldn't refine the perfect natal porcelain at all. Speaking of spiritual jade, the Seiyu tactics I practiced has long reached a certain bottleneck. Since the awakening of my talent, the body of evil ghost deduced for several months, and then I learned that I need the help of spiritual jade. However, ordinary spiritual jade has no effect. Her eyes flashed, and she took out a map made of spirit beast skin. This thing was obtained from Jin Jintian's universe ring. It was marked with the word Mushue. Jin Jintian's Mushue, spiritual jade, should be obtained from here. Su Li was very familiar with the terrain of Jiuzhou region, and the map showed that it was not in Jiuzhou region. After thinking for a moment, Su Li put away the map and flew away from Ni sect. Yin, I'm going out to do something. I'll be back in a few days. When Huayan heard the voice in her ear, she helplessly put down the case in her hand. She rubbed her eyebrows with a headache and smiled bitterly. Su Li was so thorough that she didn't have to do anything. Shaking her head, she buried her head in the case again. The intelligence of the holy sect spies and the 25 sects couldn't be sloppy at all. Just a few days after Su Li left, in Jindao cult, Su Dain sorted out the network of the sect. It was rare for her to sit quietly in the backyard for half a day. Suddenly, a breeze swept by. Ling Qinglan, who should be in the Su family, appeared outside the courtyard. Chapter 485. Uncle Long, Su Dain got up to greet him and withdrew the servants who were guarding on the side from the courtyard. Since she used the AO sword skills to kill Jin Jintian that day, she keenly sensed that Uncle Lan's mood was not quite right. She was not surprised that Ling Qinglan came alone. Ling Qinglan saw that she withdrew the maids and walked into the courtyard. He waved his hand to set a soundproof bounded domain. It seems that you already know my intention. Su Dain nodded slightly and asked tentatively, is it related to my AO sword skills? Where did you get this practice method? Ling Qinglan frowned and nodded. His voice was cold and solemn. It's the inheritance my father left to me when I was young, but I was too young at that time, so I only remembered vaguely. Until I was adopted by my mother and embarked on the road of cultivation, I was able to unlock the seal of the inheritance and know what happened to my father. Su Dain narrated with gratitude on her beautiful face. The Su family will never avenge me. If it weren't for Su Jiuzhou, I would have to wait for many years to avenge my parents. After hearing this, Ling Qinglan was a little confused. The AO sword skills must belong to Su Li, but Su Dain's expression didn't seem to be lying. Why did the AO sword skills belong to Su Dain's father, Jin Shengao? Was it possible that Jin Shengao was the successor of Su Li, and Su Jiuzhou was fake? Ling Qinglan's pupil shrank. He thought of all the contacts with Su Jiuzhou before. She was too familiar with Su Li, so she definitely had an unusual relationship with Su Li. Which one was the truth? Ling Qinglan was completely confused, but if he asked Su Jiuzhou, he would inevitably be suspected of questioning. At present, although Su Jiuzhou was avenging Su Li, it also seemed that she wanted to unify the Jiuzhou region for her own selfish desire. Su Jiuzhou, are you an enemy or a friend? Ling Qinglan sighed and restrained the complex emotions in his eyes. He left gloomily in Su Dain's puzzled eyes. Jiuli region was a region controlled by the Tianyin tribe, a holy sect. Most practitioners in this region were good at incantations and poisons, and their practice methods were also quite strange. Even with the holy sect's control, the evil forces were still rampant. It was not as peaceful as the Jiuzhou region. Therefore, just a few days after Su Li arrived, she witnessed several practitioners being cursed to death and robbed of their treasures. They died miserably. She was alone and a female practitioner, so she was inevitably patronized by others. However, the cultivation of these practitioners who survived by robbing was really not good. After Su Li accidentally blew up the heads of several evil practitioners, no one came to trouble her along the way. Following the guidance of the map, Su Li came to a cultivation city named Baishur. As soon as she entered the city, she saw stalls on both sides of the street selling all kinds of jade materials and shouting constantly. Su Li strolled around and saw many stalls selling mushui, spiritual jades. Although the purity was extremely low, it was absolutely impossible to see such a situation in other cultivation cities. Miss, are you curious about the sharp increase in the quality of jade in Baishur City? A kind-looking stall owner saw the surprise on Su Li's slightly immature face and couldn't help laughing. To tell you the truth, the spiritual mine not far from Baishur City has been almost dug out. But when the bottom is seen, it has a second spring. Many rare jade materials have been dug out from it, which makes Baishur City what it is today. Su Li's eyebrows were curved, and her thick, curly eyelashes trembled. She showed a simple smile on her face. Anyone who saw her would associate her with an inexperienced female disciple of a sect. Senior, why do you explain to me? I won't buy the things on your stall. As she said, she also pointed to the things on the stall with a look of disgust on her face. The stall owner's face stiffened. He thought that this little girl was really straightforward and didn't save him any face. However, he had been struggling at the bottom of the cultivation circle for hundreds of years, so he naturally wouldn't show what he thought on his face. He immediately replied with a calm smile. I see that you are dressed in extraordinary clothes, so you must have an extraordinary background. I just want to explain to you for a good karma. Don't worry about it, miss. I see. Su Li showed an expression of sudden realization. She immediately snorted and crossed her arms in front of her chest. My elder asked me to come out to gain more experience and buy some high-purity mushui, spiritual jades back, by the way. But I see that the purity of mushui, spiritual jades on the stalls along the way is very low. It seems that I can only go back empty-handed. The stall owner was stunned, and then he was overjoyed. He was about to continue to find a way to get information from her, but he didn't expect that the woman was unsuspecting and directly told him her purpose. That was easy. He rubbed his hands and said with a smile, Little fellow practitioner, although my cultivation is not good, I have been doing the jade business for hundreds of years. I also have a way to get the mushui spiritual jades you want. I just don't know if your elder is nearby. Su Li's eyes suddenly lit up, and she asked with a smile, Really? Of course. The stall owner nodded repeatedly. I know at a glance that you come from a famous sect. How dare I deceive you? That's great. Su Li showed a proud expression on her face. My master is busy with affairs and will come to this city in 2 days. I can do such a small thing as buying spiritual jades alone. Take me there. You will definitely benefit from it. As she said, she touched the universe ring with her fingertips and threw out a celestial stone. The stall owner was immediately surprised and delighted. He immediately put the celestial stone into the universe ring, for fear that others would see it. Thank you for your generosity, little fellow practitioner. Please come with me. As he said, he put away the stall and walked through the market to the deep alley. Su Li's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and then she returned to her innocent appearance and followed him briskly. The stall owner sensed the footsteps behind him, and a smile appeared on his kind face. But compared with the smile just now, it was a little more gloomy. As the two went deeper, the alley became narrower and darker. After a while, the stall owner walked to the end of the alley. He suddenly turned around and looked at Su Li maliciously. Su Li's smile remained unchanged, and she looked around. We're here. Why didn't I see the entrance? Ha ha ha. Hearing such a stupid question, the stall owner couldn't help but laugh ferociously. His expression was no longer kind, but full of ruthlessness. Little fat sheep, don't blame me for being ruthless. If you want to blame someone, blame your master for not teaching you to be on guard. After that, his 5 fingers turned into claws and quickly grabbed Su Li's head. However, with his cultivation in the early stage of Yuanying realm, he could kill a little girl in Jindan realm easily. Su Li was about to restrain this person and interrogate him about the whereabouts of Mushui, spiritual jade. Suddenly, she stopped her movements and showed a flustered expression on her harmless little face. Seeing this, the stall owner didn't have any compassion, but moved faster. At this moment, a cold shout suddenly sounded behind Su Li. At the same time, a white flowing light also flew quickly to block the stall owner's sharp claws. The flowing light dissipated, and its original appearance was revealed, an ancient mirror for body protection. His good deed was disturbed, and the stall owner's eyes became gloomy. He looked behind Su Li, but he saw a slightly fat and honest young man walking over with a smile. He scolded calmly, "Old guy, the rules of Baishur City are not for decoration. Since I bumped into you, don't think about doing bad things today." Speaking of this, the honest young man smiled and showed 2 small canine teeth. When the stall owner saw the young man's face, his face suddenly changed dramatically. Why did it have to be this little devil? Damn it, my big fat sheep. He struggled in his heart. He looked at Su Li, who was at a loss and seemed to have no idea what had happened. Then he looked at the honest young man who was getting closer. "Forget it, little girl. You are lucky." The stall owner snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves, and flew away. Just at the moment when he was about to leave, Su Li's clear eyes suddenly flashed a frightening black light. The stall owner only felt a chill on his neck, but he didn't care and left directly. "Tut tut." Black Lotus watched the stall owner leave and muttered, "My master is lucky, but I'm afraid you can't live for more than 3 days." After the honest young man saw the stall owner completely disappear from his sight, the smile of victory on his face immediately turned into fear. He patted his chest with lingering fear. "Fortunately, I have some reputation. Run. If he comes back, I can't beat him." With that, the honest young man ran away. Su Li smiled thoughtfully and followed him. A moment later, in a practitioner's inn, after drinking 3 bowls of tea in a row, the honest young man exhaled a long breath, as if he had discharged all the previous fear. He put down the bowl and saw Su Li staring at him. He couldn't help blushing, touched his cheek, and said, "Why are you looking at me? Although I saved your life, you don't fall in love with me at first sight, do you?" Seeing that he was so shy, Su Li couldn't help but laugh. The honest young man also seemed to feel that he was too rude. He scratched his head and said awkwardly, "Well, I like to talk nonsense since I was a child. Don't mind it." Su Li nodded and thought in her heart. The cultivation of this honest young man was only at the peak of Jindan realm, which was much worse than that of the stall owner. But the stall owner would rather give up the benefits after seeing him. Obviously, the background of this young man was not simple. Thinking of this, Su Li smiled and said, "My name is Su Jiuzhou. Thank you for your help just now. May I know your name?" "Ha ha ha, I don't deserve your name. My name is Xianin." The honest young man stretched out his teacup and said, "I also can't stand the bad behavior of that group of people. I always want to help them when I see them. If it weren't for my good parents, I wouldn't know how many times I would have died." Speaking of this, he suddenly thought of something and said with a straight face, "Yes, I forgot to ask you. How did you accidentally fall into the trap of the evil practitioner? This is fatal." Su Li sighed softly when she heard this, and her tone was a little aggrieved. "I have no experience when I go down the mountain for the first time. I wanted to do something for my master, but I didn't expect that I almost screwed it up." Alas, this sentence seemed to evoke Xian An's memory. He immediately waved his hand and comforted her. "Hey, it's nothing. Nowadays, the world is dangerous, and there are many conspiracies and tricks. Miss Su is pure and easy to be fooled. As long as you are careful in the future, you will never make the same mistake again." Su Li nodded. Thank you for enlightening me, senior fellow apprentice. I feel much better. Hearing Su Li call him senior fellow apprentice, Shannon was stunned at first, and then his smile almost reached his ears. He was the youngest in the sect, and no one had ever called him senior fellow apprentice. Seeing his reaction, Su Li couldn't help but smile. It seemed that she didn't need to go to Tyanyak Attic for the intelligence of Jili region. Chapter 486. After a meal, Su Li got the information she wanted from Shannon. The treasure map in Jin Jintian's hand had been broken in advance a few years ago and became a relic that everyone could go in and explore. In the first 2 years after the relic was opened, it was really a reign of terror. Shannon sighed. There are many tombs that have not been explored. Although there are many dangers, treasures, and spiritual materials that are not common in the outside world can be seen everywhere. All the practitioners who thought they had a little cultivation went crazy. The drama of killing each other for treasures was staged there every day. For this reason, at least 20% of the practitioners in Jinan realm in the Jili region were killed. However, few practitioners above Yuanying realm died. If no one targeted them, there were many who escaped by relying on Yuanying realm. Su Li heard this with interest and asked with a smile, "You said it so deeply. Have you seen it with your own eyes?" Shannon scratched his head embarrassedly. "I don't have that ability. I heard it from my father. And at that time, my father was afraid that I would run around, so he grounded me for 3 years." Speaking of this, an extremely deep fear flashed in his eyes, as if he had a lingering fear of those 2 years of closed-door reflection. "Your father is also for your own good." Su Li fiddled with the wine glass in her hand. Although practitioners transcend the realm of mortals, they only have one life. If they lose their life, they will have nothing. Shannon looked at Su Li in a daze and was puzzled. Wasn't she inexperienced in the world? How could she say such profound words? Su Li quickly realized the whole flaw and stuck out her tongue playfully. "This is what my master said. Now I present it to the Buddha with borrowed flowers. Please don't be offended." No, I think it makes sense." The doubts in Xianan's heart dissipated, and he waved his hand. "I didn't understand my father's behavior before. Now, after hearing what you said, I understand a little. It's great that junior sister can help." Su Li responded with joy. Shannon saw that she looked sincere and didn't seem to be fake, and he was also moved. He completely let down his guard against her. The atmosphere was silent for a moment, and Su Li broke it with a slightly shy smile. "Senior fellow apprentice, I want to go to the relic to have a look. Can you lead the way?" This. Shannon hesitated for a moment, but when he saw the disappointment between Su Li's eyebrows, he immediately gritted his teeth and grinned. Of course. This was the 5th year since the relic had been opened. It was no longer that dangerous. I went there once with my father, but if you want me to take you there, you must listen to me and not run around. Otherwise, I won't be able to save you if you encounter danger." Shannon warned seriously. After Su Li nodded repeatedly, the itinerary to the relics was finally settled. After that, the two of them booked a room in an inn and agreed to depart the next day. After dinner, Su Li saw that Xianan's face was more excited than she pretended to be. She couldn't help laughing secretly. In the end, he was still a young man. She could see at a glance that Xianan's age was no more than 500 years old, but his cultivation could reach the peak of Jinan realm. Even if he couldn't be compared with an evildoer, he was definitely a genius at the level of Tianjiao. Shaking her head, Su Li pushed the door into the room. The moment she closed the door, the runes of the tactical matrix flowed between the cracks of the door. In the blink of an eye, the whole room was blocked. The advantage of a practitioner's inn was that every room had an isolation tactical matrix. Although the grade was not high, as long as it was not deliberately destroyed, no one would come to disturb. After checking the room and confirming that there was no hidden trap left by the innkeeper, Su Li went to the inner room and sat cross-legged on the silk futon. She waved her hand, and the shadow behind her squirmed. After a while, there was another Su Li in the room. Su Li looked at the face of her previous life and frowned. but she didn't deliberately correct it. Every time she summoned the evil ghost, it appeared with the face of the previous life. Even if she corrected it, it would return to the original appearance next time. So, she simply didn't bother to care about it. With a slight sigh, Suli threw out a set of clothes for the evil ghost to put on. Then the evil ghost walked to the futon on the side and sat cross-legged, entering the state of enlightenment. Little Suli, this Black Lotus, came out of the ring in surprise and released the little white fox who had been suffocated for too long to breathe fresh air. Can the evil ghost still practice by itself? After Black Lotus asked this, Suli couldn't help raising her eyebrows. Can it? How is it possible? The evil ghost has no intelligence. As soon as the words came out, the evil ghost, who was still looking for the feeling, suddenly opened its eyes and looked at Black Lotus coldly. Black Lotus suddenly shivered and was horrified. He weakly explained that, "I am ignorant and ill-informed. Please don't take it to heart." Ho ho ho! As soon as the words came out, Suli suddenly chuckled. Black Lotus looked back at her with a dumbfounded face, and then turned to look at the evil ghost who ignored him. Suddenly, he reacted and became angry. "Suli, are you kidding me?" Suli's smile was slightly restrained, and she said meaningfully, "What did you call me?" Black Lotus's scalp was numb, and he immediately gave in. "Forget it. Let's not argue with a madman." Master, what the hell is going on? I have never seen such an evil ghost." Suli stared at Black Lotus's face and found that his reaction didn't seem to be fake. She stopped joking and shook her head. "Even you don't know." "How can I know? I only need to separate a trace of thought to integrate with the evil ghost, and the evil ghost will have its own intelligence. It can even act by itself, practice by itself, and comprehend the mental method and secret method by itself. As for the enlightenment of the evil ghost, it will be received by me at the moment when I withdraw that trace of thought, as if it was born to practice by itself." "Is there such a good thing?" Black Lotus was stunned. "Isn't it equivalent to two of you practicing at the same time? With your talent, if you speed up your practice, won't it be against the natural order?" "It's not the same," Suli said with pity. "I have tried it. When I withdraw the enlightenment and practice of the evil ghost, I will lose half of it, which is much slower than my own practice." "You should be satisfied." Black Lotus rolled his eyes. "I have never seen such a good thing like you. If the previous generations of the body of evil ghost got such a talent, they would have been crazy with joy." "Talent?" Suli was surprised and murmured thoughtfully, "This is not my awakened talent. Or it may be part of my talent. This is not all." Black Lotus's eyes were wide open, as if his eyeballs were going to pop out. "The premise is that it has eyeballs," Suli replied softly, but she didn't intend to continue to say. Black Lotus was itching in his heart, but he didn't dare to force Suli to say it. He could only pout, put the little white fox into the ring, and sulk alone. Woo woo woo, the little white fox nested in the ring space and looked at Black Lotus aggrievedly. She wanted to be with her master. Uncle Black was a big bad guy. The night passed slowly as Suli and the evil ghost comprehended the Suiyu tactics at the same time. It was a silent night. In the morning of the next day, Shannon got up and opened the door, but he saw Suli sitting at the table downstairs, enjoying the spiritual tea prepared by the inn. He immediately went downstairs and sat down at Suli's table. He said embarrassedly, "Junior sister apprentice, you came earlier than me. I'm really ashamed." Suli smiled and pushed another cup of tea to Shannon. "It's a joke. I was so excited that I didn't sleep all night. I want to see what the relics look like." "Huh." Shannon couldn't help laughing. "Junior sister apprentice, you are really interesting. But when I just went down the mountain, I was almost the same as you." Black Lotus yawned in the ring space. When he heard the conversation between the two, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. "You acted so real. You are more than 2,000 years old, but you still have the nerve to pretend to be young. You dare to speak ill of the master." "I heard it all." The voice of reincarnation sounded leisurely, and Black Lotus instantly jumped up. He glared at the spirit of reincarnation mirror that suddenly appeared in the ring space. "You damn donkey! How dare you appear in front of me?" When the phantom of the little beast heard Black Lotus's words, its old face suddenly darkened. Why do you always mention the old things? Tut! Black Lotus sneered. You still dare to show up. Aren't you afraid that Su Li still holds a grudge and grinds your bones into ashes? The little critter shuddered, and its phantom image swayed, but it quickly stabilized. It said in a muffled voice, Master had noticed me a long time ago, but she didn't make a move. I was completely refined by her blood. If she dies, I will be destroyed once again. In this way, she is not afraid of my betrayal at all. As long as I serve the Master with all my heart and shield her from nature's mysteries, there is nothing to be afraid of. At the same time, the little beast was still a little unconfident, but its attitude still made Black Lotus gnash his teeth with hatred. Also, my strength has recovered a little after swallowing the fragments. You and I are originally one, so it is easy for me to come here. I heard you speak ill of the Master just now, and I can't turn a blind eye. As soon as the words came out, Black Lotus's face instantly darkened, and he scolded, Come on, hurt each other. If Su Li is angry and crazy, none of us can survive. The little beast looked at Black Lotus's collapse with a blank face, feeling wronged. What did he say? He just said what he thought. Why did Black Lotus seem to be stimulated? He didn't know that before he woke up, there was a scene where Su Li killed herself to force Black Lotus to show up. Let's not talk about the movement in the ring first. Under the guidance of Xian, Su Li went out of the city all the way to the north. The speed was not fast. Xian also took the opportunity to tell Su Li about the current situation of Qingshui Circle. After all, it was his duty as a senior fellow apprentice to popularize the current situation of the cultivation circle. Su Li wanted to ask in a roundabout way, but she didn't expect Xian to be so tactful. She immediately slowed down her speed again and again. Compared with the current situation of the sex in Qingshui Circle, Mushue's spiritual jade became less important. The Zhuzhou region was a place where the news was blocked. Even if she could buy a lot of information from Tiny Attic, it was only the superficial situation. All the things about her were regarded as secrets by the sections. It was too difficult to know through Tiny Attic. The most convenient way was to find a person who was really born in the rich and powerful circle to ask. However, with her sensitive identity, it was difficult to find a suitable person. Fortunately, when she came to find Mushue's spiritual jade this time, she really met one by chance. Chapter 487. Nowadays, the cultivation circle is led by the four holy sects, Shangtian Shrine, Ankue Valley, Huangxing Hall, and Tiana Sect. Many holy sects with deep foundations are respected. Xian said while flying and leading the way, as if he had been in the secular world for many years and had rich experience. In fact, he just repeated what his father told him to Su Li. However, Xian's vanity was greatly satisfied when he saw Su Li's serious listening look. Among the four holy sects, the most powerful one is Shangtian Shrine, which is inclined to the evil sect. When Xian mentioned Shangtian Shrine, his eyes flashed with disgust, but Shangtian Shrine has survived from the ancient cultivation era to the present. I don't know how many terrible means it has accumulated, and it has a deep friendship with many old monsters of cultivation, including Fate Ancestor. Fate Ancestor? Su Li repeated, showing curiosity. Who is Fate Ancestor? Why do you mention him? You don't even know Fate Ancestor? Xian turned his head, and his eyes widened slightly. Junior Sister Apprentice, how does your master popularize the common sense of the cultivation circle to you? It's too irresponsible. Su Li blinked embarrassedly. Senior fellow apprentice, to be honest, this time, I sneaked out. What? Xian said in surprise, and then rolled his eyes. He scolded angrily. The people in the cultivation circle are sinister. How can you sneak down the mountain? Fortunately, you met me. If something bad happens to you, your master and senior fellow apprentices will be worried. Su Li's beautiful eyes showed a lingering fear, and she nodded very sincerely. Senior fellow apprentice, you are right. but I have come out this time. I can't go back empty-handed, can I? Besides, I have you to accompany me." Xianan was angry and amused, but he remembered that he had sneaked down the mountain more than once many years ago. His character was lively, but his parents were calm. He didn't know whose character he took after. "Forget it." Xianan waved his hand helplessly. "In this case, I will be your guide for a period of cultivation. But after going to the relics, you must promise me that you will immediately go back to the sect to keep your masters safe." "Senior fellow apprentice, you are right." Suli nodded repeatedly and finally calmed down Xianan's emotions. He organized his words and continued, "Speaking of Fate Ancestor, it is a unique title in Qingshui's circle. I heard that it has been passed down to this day, and no one knows how many people have replaced it. No one knew the specific origin of the Fate Ancestor of this generation. His cultivation was just Junior Emperor, but he was regarded as the leader of Qingshui circle by many practitioners. Not because of anything else, but because he walks the Tao of heavenly secrets." Tianji. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. She didn't say much and continued to listen. "The Tao of heavenly secrets is not the same as the Tao of divination. It is a great Tao that allows one to see the destiny of a person and even the future of the entire world of cultivators." Xianan's eyes lit up. "I heard from my father that not everyone can walk on the Tianji path. Those who pry into the secrets of the heavens will be punished by the heavens. If an ordinary cultivator were to cultivate the Tao of heavenly secrets, their lifespans would definitely be shortened. However, there's also a group of people with special constitutions who can live longer by cultivating the Tao of heavenly secrets. They might even be favored by the heavenly Tao." Suli pursed her lips and saw the envy in Xianan's eyes. Be on the same side as the heavenly axiom? Wasn't that her enemy? The reason why the Fate Ancestor of this generation is respected is because of two major contributions. Xianan's voice suddenly became high-spirited. The first major contribution is that he and the great emperor of Lihin prevented the invasion of the alien realm and set up the Lihin tablet, so that outsiders could not enter. He protected the peace of Qingshui circle for 10,000 years. The second major contribution is that he killed the daughter of luck of this generation. Su Li's pupils shrank slightly, and her voice was indeed normal. "Senior fellow apprentice, what is the daughter of luck? Why did you kill her?" Xianan immediately explained the daughter of luck to Su Li and said naturally, "The Fate Ancestor once said that the daughter of luck violated the natural law, and the natural law would be angry. Then, Qingshui's circle would be destroyed. How could the words of such a big shot be wrong? Look at Su Li, the daughter of luck 1,000 years ago. Because of her appearance, more than 80% of the talents of Qingshui circle died, which led to the shortage of talents on the list of 10,000 talents. It was a great disaster." Su Li narrowed her eyes, and a black light flashed in her pupils. In a previous life, she was born in a muddle, lived in a muddle, and died in a muddle. It turned out that in the eyes of the world, it was actually her fault. By the way, Xianan suddenly clapped his hands and subconsciously lowered his tone. "Speaking of the daughter of luck, I eavesdropped on the conversation between my father and an elder 2 days ago. The Fate Ancestor suddenly appeared a month ago and issued a decree. The daughter of luck of the new generation appeared again." Su Li was stunned for a moment and asked, "The descendant of the Ghost clan in Ghost region? That's her." Xianan looked excited and almost fell off the flying sword. According to the prediction of the Fate Ancestor, the daughter of luck of this generation is extraordinary and much more difficult to deal with than the holy girl Su. She is not only the daughter of luck, but also the taboo of the Ghost clan that has long been extinct. She has the body of evil ghost, and her means are unpredictable. Now the entire Qingshui circle has issued a wanted order. As long as anyone finds the whereabouts of the descendant of the Ghost clan and reports it to the truth, he will get an extremely generous reward." Su Li's face was slightly pale. Following Xianan's words, she naturally showed fear. There is such a terrible person in the cultivation circle. We practitioners should work together to kill the demon. Junior Sister Apprentice, you are right. Now that the chaos in the cultivation circle has just emerged, it is the time for us to show our skills. Looking at Xian An's complacent appearance, Su Li's eyes flashed with a gloomy cloud. Her lips were slightly raised, and she showed an indescribable evil intention. It turned out that her identity had been found to such a situation. If Xian hadn't pointed it out, she would still be in the dark. If she used that identity to act again, it was likely that all her previous efforts would be in vain. Fortunately, she was delayed by Zisha's affairs, and she never appeared in the eyes of the holy sex again. In this way, Zisha was her benefactor? Su Li laughed in her heart. Black Lotus, as you said, I am a mouse that everyone in the cultivation circle wants to beat. But I am not the body of evil ghost, but the daughter of luck in the previous life. Black Lotus sensed the chill in her mind and shrank his head. He didn't dare to respond for fear of angering her. The spirit of reincarnation mirror didn't dare to say anything. Although it was an accomplice of the fate ancestor and the group of people in the previous life, it did do it after all. Ow! The little white fox lying on the side of Black Lotus pricked up its ears and looked around in confusion. Why was the master angry? Junior Sister Apprentice. Junior Sister Apprentice? Xian An's voice pulled Su Li back to reality. Su Li raised her head, and the haze in her eyes faded away instantly. She smiled sweetly. Senior fellow apprentice, I'm fine. I just listened to the strange people and things that you said, and I was lost in thought. Hey, that's all in the future. Our cultivation is still weak now. If the descendant of the Ghost clan really shows up to do evil, someone will punish her. Su Li responded obediently when she heard the words, and said, My sect is not strong. I have heard of the Tianjiao list that you mentioned, but I don't know much about it. Can you explain it to me in detail? That's not difficult. Xianan waved his hand, but his finger pointed to the endless black ruins under the dark clouds ahead. However, we have already arrived at the relics. The periphery is not dangerous. Why don't we explore the periphery now? I will tell you. How about it? The smile on Su Li's face became more gentle, and her voice was crisp like the cry of an empty valley. Senior fellow apprentice, you are really a good person. Xianan was suddenly praised, and he subconsciously scratched his head. His face was slightly red, and he giggled. Jiguang's sect was the second largest sect in Juli region. Xian Jingzhou, the lord of Jiguang's sect, was a legendary cultivator in Juli region. Although Xian Jingzhou was the legitimate son of the previous lord of Jiguang's sect, he only had ordinary low-grade spiritual root, and his cultivation speed was far less than that of his peers. The previous lord spent a lot of effort to raise his spiritual root to middle grade, but he was not as good as other outstanding disciples in the sect. In addition, Xian Jingzhou neglected cultivation and was obsessed with wine. The disciples of Jiguang's sect all laughed at him in private. 1,000 years ago, the reincarnation mirror opened. Although it was a lucky chance, the danger of death was not small. The previous lord knew that his life was coming to an end, so he made up his mind to send Xian Jingzhou into the reincarnation mirror. After the bloody accident of Holy Spirit, Xian Jingzhou disappeared for decades. Everyone thought that Xian Jingzhou died in it. The previous lord was so disheartened that he didn't see his son come back until he died. But one day, Xian Jingzhou suddenly returned in an extremely powerful manner. Not only did his cultivation reach the nature's test realm, which was beyond the reach of his peers, but his combat power was also extraordinary. It was as easy as eating and drinking to crush practitioners at the same level. Therefore, relying on the loyal supporters left by his father, Xian Jingzhou became the new lord without much effort. After becoming the lord, the first thing Xian Jingzhou did was not to eliminate his opponents in the sect, but to marry an elder of a new sect in Juli region as his cultivation companion. And that cultivation companion was none other than Su Yu. Wanjian sect, Su Yu, Pavilion Head, Wen Tingshan. This move attracted the envy of countless small sects in Juli region, but no one dared to do anything under the power of the Jiguang sect. With the support of the Jiguang sect, the Wanjian sect quickly became stronger. A few years later, Xian Jingzhou and Su Yu's son was born. The young lord saved a young female practitioner in Baishur City and is exploring the periphery of the white stone relics with her. Hearing the report from his subordinates, Xian Jingzhou suddenly had a headache. He pinched his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "Have you found out the origin of the female practitioner? This little rascal is really spoiled. There's never a day where he doesn't make people worry." Su Yu, who was flipping through the recent intelligence files, immediately raised her head and said softly, "Husband, I didn't hear it clearly just now. Can you say it again?" Xian Jingzhou's face trembled slightly, and he turned his head with a smile. "My wife, I'm just worried about him. What if he's deceived by a woman of unknown origin?" Su Yu rolled her eyes and ignored him, but her eyes clearly said, "Since you are sensible, I will let you go." Xian Jingzhou waved his hand to dismiss his confidant, who had been holding back hard, and smiled bitterly in his heart. It was all the sin in the reincarnation mirror that he had been trapped in for a lifetime. He sighed and tidied up the black file at hand. The 3 big words on it were particularly conspicuous. Leanly Building. Chapter 488. The periphery of the white stone relics was covered with a faint mist, which covered the ruins and ancient buildings. It was so quiet that it was frightening. Suddenly, swish, swish, 2 white streamers fell from the sky in a straight line. After the light dissipated, Su Li and Xianan appeared. Although the danger on the periphery of the relics is low, you can't be careless. You must follow me closely, Xianan told her and looked around cautiously. His expression was not as relaxed as before. Su Li nodded slightly and followed Xianan. She narrowed her eyes and looked around. The geology of the relics was completely different from the ordinary soil outside the white stone city. It was brownish-purple like blood. From a distance, it was as black as ink, which was somewhat similar to the Blackstone Forest. However, the fog in the Blackstone Forest was so dark that people couldn't see their fingers. Compared with the white fog here, it was much weaker, at least at a glance. She could see many tall silhouettes through the fog. Unfortunately, Xianan didn't dare to go there. She didn't intend to expose her strength, so she could only give up for the time being. Xianan was born in an extraordinary family, and he had been practicing outside alone for many years. He slowed down his pace and took Su Li to familiarize herself with the relics. There were no surprises or dangers along the way. Although they encountered a few evil practitioners who didn't have eyes, they were solved by him quickly. A few days later, as Su Li expected, they got some waste treasures. But Xianan was still very happy, and his tense mind relaxed a lot. While he continued to explore with Su Li, he intermittently talked about the Tianjiao list of top 10,000 people. There are thousands of practitioners in the cultivation circle. There are always a small group of people who are favored by nature. They show extraordinary potential from an early age and are called the Tianjiao list of 10,000 people. The Tianjiao list of 10,000 people, as the name implies. It is the top 10,000 practitioners in a generation of Tianjiao. If they want to be on the list, they must fight for it through the Tianjiao battle. Speaking of this, Xianan's eyes showed a sense of eagerness. Speaking of it, this Tianjiao battle is about to begin. I'm only in my early 500 years old. I'm still young. The top 10,000 people are too far away from me, but I can still see the world. Senior fellow apprentice, is 500 years old still young? Su Li followed Xian and to clear the obstacles on the slope and pretended to be puzzled. Xianan immediately rolled his eyes. He turned his head and saw Su Li with a trace of childishness on her small face. He said angrily, 500 years is considered a long time for mortals, but for us cultivators, it is but a snap of the fingers. The age limit of the list of top 10,000 people was 2,000 years old, and it was changed every 500 years. However, the last 2 prodigy battles were not held successfully because of the disaster brought about by the Lady of Providence. Who knows how many people were over the age limit and lost their only chance to enter the prodigy rankings. Speaking of this, expectation appeared on Xian An's face. After 1,500 years, this Qianzhao battle will be extremely exciting. If I don't go and have a look, it will be a pity. Senior brother, even I want to go and have a look. It's a pity that I don't know if Master will bring me there after I return to the sect. She seemed to be attracted by the scene described by Xianan, and her face was full of expectation. Xianan laughed. Junior sister apprentice, don't worry. The Tianjiao battle is a grand event in the entire Qingshui circle. This time I will take you to find some Mushui spiritual jades and take them back. It can be regarded as making up for my mistakes. For the sake of the spiritual jades, you will have a place in the team that goes to the Shengxian mountain to watch the battle. Shannon said with certainty. Su Li's eyes lit up, and she clapped her hands repeatedly and said, "Thank you for your care, senior fellow apprentice. You are so kind." Shannon blushed again and giggled happily. When Black Lotus heard Su Li's coquettish voice, he almost vomited out the souls that he swallowed 2 days ago. But when he saw Samsara lying on the side, he swallowed the soul nourishment back in a daze. Lord, the female practitioner accompanying the young lord, is very simple. Her bone age is less than 300 years old. She is not a threat to the young lord, but her origin is unknown, and it can't be found out in a short time. She may come from another big region or be a disciple of a small sect. When Xian Jingzhou heard the words, the wrinkles on his eyebrows disappeared slightly, but he still cared about the word's unknown origin. He immediately ordered, "Continue to investigate, but you can slow down the speed appropriately. You should hurry to recruit practitioners for the Guling gambling battle. There is not much time left." Yes. After the confidant left, Xian Jingzhou rubbed his eyebrows, which were a little painful. His shoulders suddenly felt heavy, but he was not surprised. When he looked back and saw Su Yu, who was massaging his shoulders for him, the tenderness in his eyes rippled. Su Yu no longer looked like a tigress at the moment. There was a trace of worry on her beautiful face. "Master, is this trip too risky?" Xian Jingzhou's broad palm gently rested on the back of Su Yu's hand, and he shook his head firmly. The treasures in Su Li's hand have long been clearly investigated by some people. If we don't even take back this sound acquaintance, the prestige that the Linli building has built up will plummet. What's more, Xian Jingzhou's eyes darkened. Ling Qinglan and Chu Lu are still in their hands. This time, we must succeed no matter what. Su Yu is not an indecisive person. She knew the importance of this action. Although she was still extremely worried, she didn't show it. She just nodded and said, "Senior fellow apprentice is ready. If the gambling battle fails, he will take action personally. But in this case, the Wanjian sect will be exposed. Senior fellow apprentice can only take people to hide in the dark. It is not good for many people to be involved." Xian Jingzhou nodded solemnly and sighed. "I have secretly recruited experts who use poisonous insects. I hope it will not come to this step." A few days later, in an underground ruin on the periphery of the relics, with a muffled sound, Xianan climbed out of the pit with a dirty face. Seeing Su Li squatting by the pit, he sighed and spread out his palm. No one found this underground addendum before. There are also spiritual jades in it, but they are not Mushui spiritual jades. They're just ordinary spiritual jades. Su Li saw a few pieces of inferior spiritual jades scattered in Xianan's palm, and her shining eyes immediately dimmed. She reluctantly smiled and said, "Senior fellow apprentice, thank you for your hard work. If you really can't find it, forget it." At the same time, she was thinking in her heart whether to leave Xian and go to the depths of the relics alone. Seeing the disappointment in her eyes, Xianan couldn't help but feel disappointed. This was the first time that he was a senior fellow apprentice, but he couldn't help much. If his strength was stronger, he might be able to take her to the relics to have a look. Xian, who was lazy in cultivation, had the idea of working hard to cultivate again in his mind. But he couldn't become fat in one bite. It was obviously unrealistic to improve his strength now. He suppressed his anxious mind and thought for a moment. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he clapped his hands and said, "I got it. Let's go to Tiny Attic." He said excitedly, and subconsciously wanted to take Su Li's hand and take her away. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly, and she stepped aside without a trace. But she looked confused. Tiny Attic? Why would we go to Tiny Attic? Although they sell information there, the relics have only been open for a few years. If there is really information about Mushui spiritual jades for sale, they have been looted long ago. When Xian heard this, he immediately forgot the doubt that Su Li dodged his action and quickly explained, "That's different. We're going to the temporary station set up by Tiny Attic in the Whitestone relics. If there's no news about Mushui spiritual jades in that place, we don't have to waste our efforts anymore. We can simply go to Huangxing Chamber of Commerce to buy them." "I see. Senior fellow apprentice, let's go quickly." Su Li's face showed hope, and then she wondered, what is Huangxing Chamber of Commerce? Is it related to Huangxing Hall? Yes. Xian nodded and raised his hand. The flying sword was unsheathed with a clang in the air. He jumped on the flying sword and looked back with a smile. The strength of Huangxing Hall is not strong among the four-peak holy sects, but the group of old Taoist nuns do business reasonably. Huangxing Chamber of Commerce is the largest chamber of commerce in Qingshui Circle. As long as you can afford it, you could buy almost anything. Su Li called out the flying sword and showed a look of understanding. She immediately bowed slightly and said, "Thank you for solving my doubts, senior fellow apprentice. It doesn't matter. It's just a trifle. Let's go to the station and have a look." Xian waved his hand, and the flying sword rushed into the sky with him. Su Li followed closely with a faint smile in her eyes. This brat was like a treasure trove. Every sentence of his could dig out a considerable amount of information. He was truly her lucky star. Tiny Attic, the largest intelligence organization in Qingshui Circle. Originally, Su Li didn't know who set it up, but after Xian showed off, she finally learned that it was left by a force called Tianxing Valley in ancient times. Although there were a large number of intelligence dealers cooperating with Tiny Attic, and the organization was very loose, in fact, it was loose on the outside and tight on the inside. The real decision-makers of Tiny Attic rarely showed up, and their background was even more unfathomable. Even if it was not listed among the four-peak holy sects, it was the most mysterious among all the cultivation forces in Qingshui Circle. Little Su Li, Tiny Attic is not as simple as this silly boy said. In my heyday, Qingshui Circle was in a mess, but this organization was still unshakable and feared by everyone. At that time, I suspected that the real origin of Tiny Attic could be traced back to the primitive times. Black Lotus, why didn't you tell me about Tiny Attic before? Well, you didn't ask me, did you? Black Lotus was embarrassed. Fortunately, Su Li didn't probe further. She and Shannon stopped. What came into view was a temporarily built, bustling market. People were coming and going, and the regular stone streets and houses looked extremely comfortable. Su Li looked up and saw the iconic three big words, Tiny Attic, engraved on the tall stone archway at the gate of the market. And below this line of three words, there was also the word station. As Xianon said, it was a temporary station. Xianon smiled, but he secretly wiped his sweat and was anxious. He had never been here. He almost got lost after looking around the relic for a few times. Fortunately, he was lucky. I heard that the station of Tiny Attic is very safe and no one is allowed to fight. I hope it is true, Xianon muttered in his heart, and finally walked into the stone archway with Su Li. Chapter 489. As soon as they passed through the illusory gate in the stone archway, they heard the hustle and bustle, but it was not chaotic. Su Li glanced at it roughly, and then strolled with Xianon. There were stalls on both sides of the dirt and stone street. Most of the stalls were unknown objects obtained from the relics. If anyone was interested in buying, he would be pulled into a separate, soundproof tactical matrix by the stall owner to talk about it in detail. In addition to the stalls, she also saw many bulletin boards erected on the roadside, which were shining with a little spiritual light. She could see all the information at a glance with the divine awareness. Most of the messages on these bulletin boards are soliciting helpers to explore the relics together. After Xian glanced at dozens of bulletin boards, the hope in his eyes was slightly dim, but he still smiled on the surface. Let's look carefully, and we will always get something. When he said this, he suddenly narrowed his eyes and looked back abruptly, but he saw nothing. Is an illusion? Xian frowned, and he always felt that there was a faint feeling of peeping behind him. Senior fellow apprentice? Su Li called out, and he immediately returned to his senses. He smiled as if nothing had happened. Let's go and look for it again. Su Li nodded gently, and her eyes naturally drifted to the two corners behind her. There were two groups of obscure pneumas faintly locked on Xian. They should not be the same force, and one of them had impressive strength. However, for her, there was not much difference in the strength of these two groups of people, so she didn't bother to pay attention to them. Less than half a day later, Xian took Su Li to run all over the bulletin boards. There might be news of Mushui, spiritual jade, but all of them were in the depths of the relics. Seeing that Xian put his disappointment on his face without scheming, Su Li secretly laughed in her heart, but she comforted him on the surface. Senior fellow apprentice, don't worry. I see that the news on the bulletin board is changing every day. Why don't we wait here for a few days? Maybe we will be lucky enough to meet it. That's the only way. Xian sighed and agreed with Su Li, but he didn't have much hope in his heart. He was even thinking about which branch of the Huangxing Chamber of Commerce to go to. Taking a deep breath, Xian's eyes became firm again. There was no turning back. Since he had promised this girl that he would help her find Mushui, spiritual jade, he would definitely not break his promise. Young sect leader is still childish, the old man who secretly protected Xian and shook his head, but a smile appeared on his face. Otherwise, I will arrange a surprise for this kid. But in that case, will the master say that I spoil him too much? In the next few days, Xian took Su Li to see the bulletin board. Unfortunately, the spiritual messages in the bulletin board were changing every day, but there was no new news about Mushui spiritual jade. Junior sister apprentice, I think we'd better go to Huangxing Chamber of Commerce. In front of the notice board, Xian took back his divine awareness, sighed deeply, turned his head, and said. Su Li was about to nod, but at this moment, a travel-worn practitioner came in a hurry. He stretched out his palm and pressed a rune into the groove of the bulletin board. Then he rushed to the next bulletin board without looking at it. Boom! A burst of light emerged on the notice board. Xian's expression froze, and he intercepted the extra spiritual message. Spiritual light has appeared in the Gu burial grounds periphery. A top-grade numinous treasure has appeared, and there are many Gu demons. Now we are recruiting practitioners whose cultivation is not lower than Jinan realm to go together. The reward. Those who kill many Gu demons can exchange their poisonous insect cores for Mushui, spiritual jade. When Xian saw the last line of words, his eyes suddenly brightened, and he said in surprise, there is news, and it is in the periphery. Let's go and have a look. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly, but she also showed surprise on the surface. Then she left. Not long after, the two came to the stone archway of the station. Xian saw a group of people gathered there from a distance, and they were surrounded by temporary wooden fences. Xian roughly counted more than 50 people. The leading middle-aged practitioner's cultivation was not high, only hovering in the early stage of Yuanying realm. But his clothes and the flying sword in his hand revealed the fact that he had an extraordinary background. Xian ran through this person's face in his mind, but he did not find a junior of a famous sect who matched him. However, he was only familiar with the descendants of famous sects in Jili region. Qingshui's circle was so big, so this person probably came from other big regions after hearing the news. Stop! Xian approached and was immediately stopped by two serious-looking guards. He immediately held his fist and smiled. Fellow practitioner, we brother and sister received the news on the bulletin board, so we come to help. As soon as the words came out, the hostility in the eyes of the two guards was slightly relieved. One of them said coldly, My master is recruiting practitioners in Jindan realm, not young masters and young ladies who come out for sightseeing. If you want to join my master's team, you must have the corresponding strength. Xian'an was not annoyed when he heard the words. He took a step forward, and the pneuma of the peak of Jindan realm was undoubtedly revealed. Su Li also cooperated and revealed her cultivation in the early stage of Jindan realm. The guard's face suddenly changed, and he changed his previous indifferent attitude. He also held his fist and said pleasantly, "You two, please." Xian'an nodded with a smile and entered the fence. The middle-aged practitioner in luxurious clothes immediately greeted them. "Young masters, you have reached Jindan realm at such a young age. You must have an extraordinary background. My servants really offended you just now. It doesn't matter. In the cultivation circle, the strong are respected." "I understand." Xian'an waved his hand and said indifferently. The middle-aged practitioner touched the universe ring with his finger and took out 2 crystal-clear water-blue spiritual jades. "This is an apology gift. Please accept it, young heroes." Seeing this thing, Su Li's calm and obedient face suddenly froze. She stared at the spiritual jades in the hands of the middle-aged practitioner and slightly stimulated the Suyu tactics in her body. Immediately, a subtle water spiritual power separated from the spiritual jades and integrated into her body. At this moment, Su Li immediately felt that the originally solid bottleneck of Jindan realm had a tendency to disintegrate, but it only disintegrated by 1/10,000th, and then it stopped. Mushue's spiritual jades were useful. Su Li's eyes changed, and she was thinking, since Mushue's spiritual jades were useful, would the other Mu spiritual jades of the 5 elements also be effective? Among the Mu spiritual jades of the 5 elements, only Mushue's spiritual jades and Mushue's spiritual jades were precious. These 2 kinds of spiritual jades were the holy medicine for healing, and they were the raw materials of the life-melting pill and the life-melting pill. The other 3 kinds of spiritual jades were much more common. After this experiment, she had a preliminary estimate in her mind. If she wanted to break through the bottleneck of Jindan realm, she would need at least tens of thousands of spiritual jades. The production of Mushue spiritual jades was not high, so it was obviously unrealistic to use it for practice. Xian'an didn't want to accept it, but seeing Su Li's focused and very interested look, he didn't refuse after all. After taking the spiritual jades, he cupped his fists and thanked her. Mushue's spiritual jades were not precious to him. Although there were not many Mushue spiritual jades collected by the Jiguang sect, he knew that his father's most precious treasure was much rarer than Mushue spiritual jades. Any one of them could be worth thousands of Mushue spiritual jades. However, if he really took those things out to exchange for Mushue spiritual jades, he didn't know whether he could get it or not, but he would definitely be taken back by his father and put in confinement before he could reach that step. Thinking of the confinement he had been in these years, Xian'an shook his head hard to get rid of the strange thoughts in his mind. Then he stuffed the spiritual jades into Su Li's hands and transmitted the sound. "Although I don't know this person, he is generous, humble, and polite. I don't think he will go back on his words for that little reward. Junior sister apprentice, don't worry." Su Li held the spiritual jades that were still warm in her hand. She slightly pursed her lips and hesitated to transmit the sound. "Otherwise, I can take these 2 Mushue spiritual jades back to fool the master. I don't want you to be in danger, senior fellow apprentice." Xian'an was moved, but he couldn't help laughing. He said helplessly, "The mouth is short of the mouth." He said that these 2 spiritual jades are an apology gift. "You really think it is an apology gift? If we leave now, we will probably be stopped." "Really?" Su Li's eyes showed panic. "Then we don't want these spiritual jades. Let's leave quickly." "Don't worry. Don't panic." Xian'an pressed the spiritual jades back into Su Li's palm, blinked, and said, "So many people go together. What are you afraid of? If there is really danger, we can run away." "Then okay." Su Li nodded worriedly. She lowered her head to look at the Mushue spiritual jades in her hand, and a trace of mockery flashed in her eyes. They looked for Mushue spiritual jades for only a few days, and Mushue spiritual jades came to them obediently. How could there be such a good thing in the world? What's more, she glanced back at the few practitioners who came in after them. Although they also looked like casual practitioners, the pneuma revealed by their gestures was clearly the same as that of the middle-aged practitioner. Most of the people waiting in the fence, she had actually felt it from one of the groups of people who secretly stared at Xian, and it's interesting. Since Xian is unwilling to leave, I will see who wants to trouble him. Thinking of this, Suli slightly raised the corner of her mouth and pretended to walk with Xian unconsciously. Xian obviously couldn't notice this. He just took Suli to sit down in a place and waited patiently. When it was getting late, the number of people in the fence had reached 80. Suli was surprised to find that the second group of people who secretly followed Xian and also sneaked in. The two groups of people mixed together, and no one recognized the real purpose of the other. The atmosphere was strange and harmonious. The middle-aged practitioner in luxurious clothes also frowned at the moment. The person he sent clearly only deliberately issued a commission in front of Xian and in order to lead him to come here alone. Originally, it was an accident that Suli had never seen before, but he didn't expect that when he gathered his own people, more than 30 casual practitioners came in one after another. Judging from Xianan's reaction, they were not people of the Jiguang sect. Your Honor, there are more than 30 miscellaneous people. How should we deal with them? Some people under his command showed hesitation. The middle-aged practitioner who was originally smiling narrowed his eyes when he heard the words, and his smile became a little more casual. They are just some repulsive casual practitioners in Jindan realm. Since they broke into the hell, we can kill them together. After we kill the boy of the Xian family, we will take the benefits and leave. We don't have to stay in the Juli region anymore. Many people dressed as guards were shocked and bowed their heads in response. The skinny elder who had been resting on the side also opened his eyes and nodded gently. The middle-aged practitioner smiled more when he saw this. He didn't care about the guards. As long as the skinny elder agreed, it would be foolproof. Even if the rest of the people died, it didn't matter. Chapter 490. Master, it's almost time. Behind the fence, a guard beside the middle-aged cultivator whispered in a low voice. The middle-aged cultivator turned the jade ring on his thumb, walked to the center of the field, and said with a bright smile, "Everyone, it's almost time. Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, all the practitioners who were resting stood up. One person beside the middle-aged practitioner immediately led the way. They passed through the range of the tactical matrix, and the other 80 people immediately followed. On the way, the middle-aged practitioner talked about some precautions in the burial ground of poisonous insects. You must be familiar with the burial ground of poisonous insects, but for the sake of everyone, I still have to explain. There are opportunities everywhere in the burial ground of poisonous insects. Don't let go of any poisonous insect stone. Maybe there is a precious poisonous insect in the state of tortoise. Moreover, you can kill poisonous insect demons, but you can't destroy the demonic mother. Otherwise, no one can save you. Shannon nodded repeatedly. His father once said that the White Stone Relics was built on a huge burial ground of poisonous insects. It was normal for there to be a small burial ground of poisonous insects in the periphery. Relying on this, he became even more confident in the operation this time. Suli only knew a little about it. After secretly asking Xian, and a touch of understanding flashed through her eyes. This White Stone Relics turned out to be a burial ground of poisonous insects for cultivation. In the ancient cultivation era, poisonous insect practitioners existed. Although they were rare, each poisonous insect practitioner's means were unpredictable. They did things that ordinary people couldn't do, and the poisonous insects in their hands also had their own functions. In the reincarnation mirror, the sound acquaintance, poisonous insect tracking for miles, and poisonous soul eating she encountered were all very rare poisonous insects in the poisonous insect cultivation system. Ordinary poisonous insects simply superimposed the cultivation of poisonous insect practitioners, and their functions were very limited. Su Li still remembered that in the reincarnation mirror, she used sound acquaintance for the first time. She diverted the trouble to Yang Wei and solved a big problem for herself. Sound acquaintance was refracted in Qing Shui's circle, and it still had the same effect. Even if a practitioner in Juji realm used it, it would be difficult for a practitioner in Huashan realm to distinguish whether it was real or fake. If she got it again, it would play a greater role. Thinking of this, Su Li's eyes flashed, and she glanced around. The poisonous insect cultivation was good, but the premise was that this action was real. An hour later, the group of more than 80 people had reached the critical point between the outer and inner ring of the ruins. If they advanced a few more miles, the danger would increase by several times. Xianan looked at the desolate and lonely ruins around him. Except for their team, there was no one else. Is this really the Gu burial ground? He couldn't help but ask. The middle-aged cultivator smiled. Young hero, don't worry. If the Gu graveyard was so easy to find, it would have been dug out 2 years ago. We wouldn't have had a chance. When Xianan heard the words, he felt it was reasonable and temporarily put down the doubts in his heart. But he was easy to deceive. Among the other 30 people, an old man in a gray robe noticed that something was wrong. His face suddenly changed, and he shouted, "Young lord, be careful. There's a killing array underground." As soon as the words came out, Xianan's pupils shrank instantly. Without saying a word, he pulled Su Li back and wanted to get away from the middle-aged practitioner. Damn it, it's the bastards of the Jiguang sect. The middle-aged cultivator's expression turned ugly. He waved his hand and shouted, "Attack!" As soon as he gave the order, the practitioners dressed as guards, who had faintly formed a circle around Xian and approached in an instant. Xian's expression was cold. He waved one hand, and dozens of spiritual jades exploded, turning into barriers to protect the surroundings. Colorful spiritual power poured on them and blasted in the silent mountain. At the same time, the rest of the middle-aged cultivator subordinates had also fought with the practitioners of the Jiguang sect. In a few seconds, there were casualties. Young lord, the old man in a gray robe's face changed wildly. His white sleeves swelled in the wind and turned into a huge knife. When he slashed down, the terrifying wave that poured into the blade cut a dozen guards in front of him into dozens of pieces in the blink of an eye. Nature's test realm. When the middle-aged cultivator saw this scene, his face changed slightly. His eyes were gloomy, but he didn't panic. He said respectfully, "Elder Ghost, things have changed. Please help." The skinny old man, who was less than 6 feet tall, who had been beside him, narrowed his eyes into a line. Suddenly, he opened his eyes a little, and his figure disappeared in a flash. The old man in a gray robe was so anxious that he quickly approached Xian, and suddenly, a white claw shadow attacked him without warning, and the target was his heart. The old man in a gray robe snorted coldly. His left sleeve moved and turned into a silver round shield, blocking in front of the claw shadow. Ding, 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 ding. The crisp sound of the 5 fingers colliding mixed into a sound. 5 black spots appeared on the silver round shield, and the entire shield was dyed black in the blink of an eye. The old man in a gray robe was moved. He immediately threw the round shield on the ground, letting it be polluted by the black and become a pile of black scrap iron. Sun Luo Claw, you are Wanxiang old demon. The old man in a gray robe's face became gloomy. The skinny old man looked at him expressionlessly and suddenly laughed. Tut tut. It turns out that you, immortal Mirage Blade, Qiu Zhen, are the lackey of the Jiguang sect. You really lose the face of casual practitioners. Qiu Zhen's identity was seen through, and he had a cold sweat. I was originally from the Jiguang sect. How can I lose face? But you, when did you, Wanxiang old demon, fall to the point of working for others? Hearing this, Wanxiang old demon didn't get angry but laughed. He pointed to the luxurious middle-aged practitioner and sneered maliciously. "See clearly, I am just cooperating with the people of the Ghost Dome. After finishing this task, I will continue to be free. You'd better think about how to save your master." "What, the Ghost Dome?" Qiu Zhan's heart thumped, and he was even more anxious and worried. The Ghost Dome was famous in the Julie region for only recognizing money, but not people. It did all kinds of bad things, but it was very slippery, which made people unable to catch it. Unexpectedly, this time, the people of the Ghost Dome actually wanted to kill the young lord, who was against the Jiguang sect. Qiu Zhan was shocked and angry, but Wanxiang Old Demon stood in front of him, and he had no good way to save Xian and Hiss. "I'm in trouble." Xianen opened the universe ring and glanced at the few protective talismans left in it. He only felt a splitting headache. If he had known this earlier, he would have taken more talismans and not pretended to be a hero in front of his mother. Now, he constantly replenished the talismans and then looked up at Qiu Zhan in the gap. "Grandpa Qiu, you reminded me earlier." He knew that his father would definitely send someone to protect him secretly, but he didn't know that it was Qiu Zhan who was good at disguise. He didn't expect that the enemy was so well prepared this time, and obviously wanted to kill him. "I didn't do anything bad. Who did I offend?" Xian An's eyelids were twitching, and he touched a sword rune hanging on his neck from time to time. He smiled bitterly in his heart. The trump card given by his father was powerful, but it could only be used once. What he was facing now was the siege of 70 or 80 people. Crack! Suddenly, a harsh cracking sound sounded. Xianen trembled in his heart, and all the talismans in his head burst into a spiritual shield. "Young Lord of Jiguang's sect, why are you struggling? Just let us kill you, so that we can finish our work earlier." Outside the shield, the voice of a luxurious practitioner came slowly. Xianen snorted coldly and grinned. "Bastards of Ghost Region, I'm very lucky. I like to see whether you are faster or my father is faster." "Ha ha! Young Lord Xian is really cute. My people don't set a big tactical matrix for isolation nearby. I'm afraid that your carrier rune is useless." Xianen was sullen and didn't speak. He continued to manipulate the spiritual shield to delay time. "Senior fellow apprentice, let me out so that you can hold on for a while," Su Li suddenly said, and Xianen remembered that there was another person beside him. He immediately showed an ugly smile to Su Li. "Junior sister apprentice Jiuzhou, what are you talking about? This time, I really got you into trouble." Su Li shook her head and said, "If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have fallen into the trap. It's my fault." "Ha ha ha, it's really a loving couple. What a touching picture. Young Lord Xian, since you like your junior sister apprentice so much, why don't you kill yourself on the spot? Maybe I'll let her live if I'm in a good mood." The voice from the outside came again. Xianen grinned and laughed. "In your dreams, you people of Ghost Region are all untrustworthy. If I believe it, am I a fool? Even if I die, I will disgust you before I die. Sword rune, open for me." As soon as he finished speaking, he touched the thumb-sized sword on his neck with one hand. In an instant, sharp and terrifying sword light rose from the top of his head, like a king descending, extremely domineering. Boom, boom, boom. In everyone's horror, all the spiritual power and spiritual shields were shattered, turning into nourishment for the huge sword light. "This is..." Su Li and the middle-aged practitioner changed their faces at the same time. Qiu Zhan and Wanxiang Old Demon also stopped. Looking at the white sword light suddenly rising in the sky, they all felt a sense of fear. What method is this? At this moment, Xianan's face was pale. He clenched his teeth and stared at the huge sword rising in the air. He shouted in his heart, "Move! Don't use this sword rune easily unless it's a last resort. Otherwise, you will lose 800 men to kill 1,000 enemies. You must remember this." Thinking of what his father said, Xianen finally understood that his father was simply a trap for his son. "I can't use any means at all, let alone kill the enemy." The huge sword in the sky did not move for a long time. The middle-aged practitioner finally came to his senses, and his face was pale. When he thought of the fear just now, he couldn't help but become angry out of shame. He sneered. Our young Lord Xian is really kind-hearted. Before you die, you even put on such a big show. I will take your head. As he said, the middle-aged practitioner appeared in front of Xian and in a flash and reached out to pinch Xian's neck. Xian blushed and tried to avoid it. But the sword was on top of his head, which was like a mountain pressing on his body. Only his mouth could move. Young Lord. Qiu Zhan's eyes widened in anger, but the Wanxiang old demon laughed. No matter how crazily he attacked, the Wanxiang old demon's incorporeal technique blocked all of his attacks, not affecting the middle-aged cultivator at all. At this critical moment, Xianin, who fell into despair, suddenly saw a white palm grab the middle-aged practitioner's wrist. Everything came to an abrupt end. He turned his eyes in amazement and tried to look at the junior sister apprentice beside him, but his eyes were blurred. Su Li's smiling face appeared in his eyes, which was fascinating. Her red lips opened slightly, and her eyes turned. Xianin, what's your father's name? Chapter 491. My father. Xianin froze for a moment and subconsciously replied in astonishment. My father's name is Xian Jingzhou. This was not a secret. Everyone knew that he was the only son of the lord of Jiguang's sect. Su Jiuzhou asked his father's name, and he subconsciously said his father's name. Ho ho, Su Li chuckled, which was as crisp as a silver bell. At the same time, she exerted force with her palm, and the wrist that was caught made the same crisp sound. The palm mixed with blood fell down. The bloody scene coupled with Su Li's gentle laughter stimulated Xian and to have goosebumps all over his body. The middle-aged practitioner had no time to be shocked or care about his broken right hand. He withdrew and retreated. What kind of power was this? His real cultivation had surpassed Yuanying realm and reached the half-step to Huashan realm. He was only a step away from being reborn. Even if he was not good enough, his hand bones would not be crushed by a little girl. Did he kick an iron plate? Who are you? The middle-aged practitioner stared at Su Li. He held his wrist that was still dripping with blood with one hand, withdrew his hand, and asked with fear. The rest of the practitioners also stopped attacking for the time being. Su Li, who was no different from a transparent person in everyone's eyes, finally showed her true face at this moment. Who am I? She raised her eyebrows and glanced at Xianin, who was still in a daze. She said with a smile, I can barely be regarded as the elder of this kid. You want to kill him, so it's impolite not to reciprocate. The middle-aged practitioner's pupils shrank when he heard the words. Without saying a word, a blood mist burst out of his body. In the blink of an eye, his figure flew out of the sky like an arrow leaving the string. This sudden scene caused all the cultivators who were dressed as guards to be stunned, and then their expressions changed drastically. They couldn't be bothered to curse, and were about to flee in all directions. Ho ho, that's not possible. Anyone who hears this must die. Su Li's laughter echoed. She pointed in the air with her fingertips, and the giant sword above Xian's head instantly divided into countless small swords, densely covering the entire sky. Such a movement finally alarmed Wanxiang, Old Demon, and Qiu Zhan, who were fighting fiercely. Horror flashed in Wanxiang, Old Demon's eyes. He rolled up the magic treasure in his sleeves and was about to escape. But before he could escape more than 10 feet, Qiu Zhan saw that the small swords that were as fine as rain stopped for a moment and instantly changed direction, like a golden rain. Wanxiang, Old Demon, hurriedly raised his magic treasures to block the attacks. The crisp clanging sound were like rain hitting banana leaves. But how could the weaker banana leaves withstand the storm? Kacha! The cracking sound rang in Wanxiang, Old Demon's ears like a death knell. He shifted his eyes, revealing a pleading expression. In the next instant, 10,000 swords pierced through his heart. Pooh! Puff! 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 Puffed! Countless small swords pierced through, erasing his figure in the blink of an eye, leaving only a faint blood mist floating in the air. Qiu Zhan looked at the dead Wanxiang, Old Demon in front of him and felt his body stiffen. He did not dare to move. When Su Li said those words just now, He was concentrating on fighting against the Wanxiang old demon, so he did not hear it. When did such a horrible, evil figure come to Jili region? Qiuzhen took a light breath and barely stabilized his mind. He turned his head and saw corpses everywhere. The people of Ghost region were all killed by the mysterious girl when he was in a daze. No, there's one left. He thought of the middle-aged practitioner who escaped by exploding his blood. Suddenly, a bloody flowing light flashed in the sky. Bang! The blood mist dissipated, and the figure was revealed. The middle-aged practitioner looked at Su Li with astonishment. His eyes were full of despair and despair. How can I come back? Before he finished his words, Su Li smiled slightly and slapped him into a blood mist. It was impossible for a man in the half-step of Huashan realm to escape in front of her by such an inferior means as exploding his blood. She just let him enjoy the despair after a moment of hope, and let the nightmare cast a spell on the middle-aged practitioner. Senior fellow apprentice, come back. Su Li picked up the cracked sword rune on the ground and shook it in front of Xianin. When Xianin heard the word senior fellow apprentice, he suddenly shivered, and his dazed pupils slowly became lively. He looked at Su Li, who was still smiling in front of him, and then turned his head to see the blood all over the ground, as well as Qiuzhen and others who were also stunned. He still couldn't believe what he saw. It was like a dream. Was the person in front of him really the little junior sister apprentice who had been with him for several days? Don't call me senior fellow apprentice, Xianin swallowed, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. Although Su Jiuzhou just took action to save him, her cruel means were really chilling. Su Li sighed when she saw this. She turned around desolately and said, I didn't mean to hide it. Since you are afraid, I will leave now. An's heart trembled when he heard this. Yes, Su Jiuzhou committed so many murders for him, wasn't it? What was he afraid of? Xianin, were you still a man? Don't go. I'm not afraid. He looked anxious and stepped forward to stop in front of Su Li. But he saw Su Li smiling gently and didn't look sad at all. Xianin couldn't help but smile bitterly. Although he was fooled, he felt much better after this. He immediately scratched his head and said embarrassedly, You are better than me. I can't be called senior fellow apprentice. I will call you senior sister apprentice Jiuzhou in the future. Su Li nodded gently and agreed. This guy was in a daze just now, and he probably didn't hear that sentence. Young lord. At this time, Qiuzhen finally summoned up the courage to come over. Seeing Su Li looking at him, he froze and quickly saluted, Senior, I am Qiuzhen, an elder of Naiman branch of Jiguang's sect. Su Li nodded slightly and said lightly, Don't let others know what happened today. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Qiuzhen suddenly sweated on his forehead and nodded repeatedly. At the same time, he looked at the natural relationship between his young lord and Su Li, and he was also envious. The young lord was really lucky. Although this mysterious female practitioner's means were like the devil, she was very close to the young lord. Now the situation of Jiguang's sect was not good. If this person could help, maybe the lord could be relieved. Thinking so, he retreated with Su Li. Su Li asked the nightmare to cast a spell of words binding on Qiuzhen and others without a trace, and then let them leave with Su Li. Xianin was simple-minded, but it didn't mean that Qiuzhen and others were the same. She reached out and collected the universe rings of Gue, Mo, and others. She took out about 30 pieces of Mushui spiritual jades from them and gave the rest to Xianin. She, who had robbed the holy sects, didn't like this little wealth. Xianin was usually disciplined very strictly. He had never seen so many spiritual stones. He immediately accepted them happily and quickly adapted to his new identity. He looked up and asked, Senior sister apprentice, where are we going now? Su Li picked up a Mushui spiritual jade and smiled sweetly. Since this is the burial place of poisonous insects, isn't it a pity if we don't find 1 or 2 poisonous insects for cultivation? An's eyes brightened when he heard the words. He laughed and said, Senior sister apprentice, you are right. After setting the goal, the two quickly entered the inner periphery of the relic after packing up. Qiuzhen, who followed them secretly, saw this scene and could only helplessly return to Baishur City. It was meaningless to continue to follow them. If they encountered trouble that even the female senior couldn't solve, they would not be opponents. 3 days later, Su Li and Xian found the first burial place of poisonous insects. At the same time, they also encountered a huge centipede poisonous insect demon with a height of hundreds of meters, which set off a monstrous wind. Xian was horrified. Su Li just pointed out a finger, and the golden lightning flashed. The centipede poisonous insect demon, which had just escaped from the burial place of poisonous insects, was burnt by the lightning before it could make trouble. Senior Sister Apprentice, do you also know the thunder method? It's so powerful. Last time, you clearly used the sword commanding skill. While Xian was amazed, he saw Su Li's hands move quickly. She pulled out the most essential tender meat of the centipede and put it into the universe ring. Senior Sister Apprentice, what are you doing? Su Li didn't answer. She tilted her head and looked at the east. Without saying a word, she carried Xian and disappeared. Not long after, a group of practitioners with extraordinary numas came. When they saw the huge centipede poisonous insect demon, which was bigger than a mountain, they were shocked. The inner periphery of the relic was covered with white mist. The night was as cool as water. Beside the clear and quiet lake, a small isolation tactical matrix was formed by Su Li's fingers, which made Xian's eyes full of admiration. Senior Sister Apprentice, do you also know tactical matrix? Su Li smiled and still didn't answer. She put spiritual firewood in the tactical matrix to make a fire, and then skewered the centipede meat on the bright flying sword and put it on the fire. After finishing this step, she waved her sleeve robe, and many bottles and jars appeared around her. The fragrance was overwhelming. Xian's eyes widened. Was she going to barbecue? Senior Sister Apprentice actually used spiritual firewood of ordinary practitioners to refine elixirs to cook. This was really too fragrant. The spiritual firewood crackled. Xian sat cross-legged beside the campfire and looked at Su Li attentively. Her hands were like flowing water, sprinkling layers of spices on the centipede meat. The fresh and tender meat glistened with oil and made a sizzling sound, and there were bursts of spiritual energy surging. How delicious was this? Xian couldn't help swallowing his saliva. He stared at the meat skewers and was unwilling to look away. Su Li looked at it and laughed. She handed over the meat skewers that had been made in her hand. This poisonous insect demon has 2,000 years of cultivation. You eat less to avoid nosebleeds. Is there a cultivation limit for eating meat skewers? Xian heard such a remark for the first time. He couldn't help but feel bitter, but his hands moved extremely quickly. He took the meat skewers and took a bite. Crack! It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. In the next moment, the extremely delicious taste exploded in his mouth, turning into waves that impacted the taste buds. Xian stared at the skewer in his hand in a daze. After a long time, he wiped his eyes, and his eyes were wet. It was delicious, and he cried. It's not delicious when it's cold. Su Li reminded him faintly. Xian immediately came to his senses and ate up the meat skewers quickly. He even wanted to swallow his tongue. Only after one skewer, the hot spiritual power poured into his limbs and bones. Xian only felt warm all over, as if he was in a stove. His face instantly turned red, and soon he began to have nosebleeds. Su Li shook her head and laughed. Fortunately, she sprinkled some neutralizing powder. Otherwise, a centipede poisonous insect demon in nature's test, even if there was only a piece of meat, could not be borne by people in Jindan realm. Xian covered his nose with one hand and wiped his tears with the other. Senior Sister Apprentice, it's so delicious. Ugh. Chapter 492. This meat is full of nimbus, which is suitable for you to practice. Su Li reminded him, and Xian immediately sat up straight. He ran the mental method for a moment and entered the state of meditation. Su Li saw that his breath was stable and there was no danger, so she ignored him. She took out more than 20 poisonous insect stones from the Black Lotus ring and cracked them one by one. The centipede poisonous insect demon was quite powerful, and the poisonous insect stone it guarded was not an ordinary one. Crack. Perhaps it was a long time ago. Suli easily cracked the first poisonous insect stone without much effort. It was scorched black and lifeless inside. Even she couldn't recognize what kind of poisonous insect it was. After all, the poisonous cultivation insects in Qing Shui's circle are somewhat different from those in the reincarnation mirror. They are not only of distinct grades, but also have various functions. I can't distinguish the types of poisonous insects just by looking at the surface of the poisonous insect stone. I don't know if what I learned in the reincarnation mirror can be used to refine and drive poisonous insects. Many thoughts flashed through Su Li's mind, and the second poisonous insect stone in her hand was broken. This time, what she saw was no longer the scorched gravel, but a weak cyan turtle. The turtle shell was triangular, like a pocket-sized mountain. It turns out to be the poisonous power insect, but I don't know which grade it is. The poisonous cultivation insects were divided into 7 grades according to grades. The first grade was the lowest, and the 7th grade was the highest, corresponding to the 7 realms of cultivation. Suli recognized this poisonous insect, and her eyes lit up slightly. Although the poisonous power insect was not as good as the poisonous body insect among the poisonous cultivation insects, it was also a relatively rare poisonous insect. The poisonous power insect fed on demon beasts. Suli happened to collect a lot of meat of the centipede poisonous insect demon. She took out a few pieces and threw them over. The originally slow cyan turtle immediately crawled quickly and bit the meat in its mouth, trying to swallow it. Seeing this, Suli put it aside and smashed the remaining poisonous insect stones together. She got 3 identical cyan turtles. They looked like they were about to starve to death, and her grade couldn't be seen. Suli threw a large piece of raw meat for the 4 little turtles to eat, and then absorbed the Mushui spiritual jade on the side. Although there was not much demon meat in the universe ring, it was the most essential part of the poisonous insect demon's body. It was enough to feed these poisonous insects for a long time. It was a silent night. In the morning of the next day, Xianan woke up from meditation. He looked inside his body and suddenly found that the originally strong Jindan had a few cracks. He might be able to break the Jindan and reach Yuanying realm after a few days of hard work. Such powerful demon meat. Xianan was speechless secretly. There was no shortage of poisonous insect demon meat in Jili region, but he had never heard that it could be used to make spiritual soup to assist cultivation. This was probably Su Jiuzhou's unique secret skill. Thinking that Su Jiuzhou even displayed such a precious secret skill in front of him without concealment, Xian Anxin couldn't help but feel moved. He opened his eyes and looked around. He was stunned by what he saw. Why were there 4 more turtles by the bonfire? Where did senior sister go? You're awake. Su Li's voice suddenly came from behind. Xianan was so scared that he shivered. When he turned around, he saw Su Li coming over with a few lively strange fish. You can't be too hasty in your cultivation. You ate the meat of the goo demon yesterday, so you can't eat it again today. Otherwise, you won't be able to absorb it and your foundation will be damaged. After that, Su Li put the processed fish on the shelf and continued. These fish are poisonous. You will feel a little pain after eating them, but it can erase the influence of the poisonous insect demon's meat in your body. Eat them all when they are cooked. Xianan nodded repeatedly. He glanced at the strange fish with sharp teeth in its mouth and swallowed in horror. Could poisonous fish in Jindan realm really be eaten? Although he trembled in his heart, he still trusted Su Li unconditionally and wondered how to eat them later. At this moment, buzz, 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 buzz. Several halos lit up on the surface of the 4 cyan turtles motionless by the bonfire one after another. Among them, the smallest one lit up the most halos. There were 4 halos, and the others all had 3 halos. Rank 4 poisonous insect. Xian An's eyes widened, and he exclaimed, Senior Sister Apprentice, "Are these?" Suli answered softly and held up the only rank 4 poisonous insect. The little cyan turtle awkwardly rubbed against Su Li's fingertips. There was a smile on her usually indifferent face. The poisonous insect method, learned in the reincarnation mirror, was useful. Otherwise, these poisonous insects could not be awakened at all. They would have died when she broke the poisonous insect stone. Senior sister apprentice even knows poisonous insect method, Xianen muttered to himself, and was completely absent-minded. In Jili region, there were many people who knew poisonous insect cultivation, but very few people really knew poisonous insect method. Even in their Jiguang sect, only a very old grand elder knew a little about it. As for himself, his understanding of poisonous insect only stopped at recognizing the poisonous insect ring. He didn't even know what poisonous insect was in Su Li's hand. Xianen was stunned, but he saw Su Li's hand move again. She picked up the other 3 rank 3 poisonous insects and softly chanted an obscure incantation. Then Xianen saw the rank 4 poisonous insect suddenly open its mouth and swallowed the 3 rank 3 poisonous insects in one gulp. Not even a drop of blood splashed out. At the same time, the rank 4 poisonous insect exuded a mysterious pneuma. A new layer of halo shadow faintly appeared outside the halo on the surface of its body. What is this? Is the rank 4 poisonous insect going to advance? Xianen looked at it with a confused face. He could not understand what Su Li was doing. The poisonous insect's digestive ability was very strong. After a while, the pneuma of advancement disappeared. At the same time, the shadow on the surface of its body was also fixed and did not solidify. The limit of rank 4. Su Li frowned slightly for a moment, and then she was relieved. She learned the method of poisonous insect fusion from the first life of reincarnation mirror. 3 poisonous insects of the same rank could be integrated into a higher poisonous insect. The 4 poisonous insects in front of her were obviously of insufficient rank. She had made up for it with her method, which was the limit. What else could she be dissatisfied with? Thinking of this, Su Li smiled and pinched the poisonous insect in her hand. When she slightly stimulated it, she suddenly felt that her strength had improved a little, but it was not obvious. After my physical body awakened the evil ghost in Gue region, I was tempered by a lot of thunder. Most of it has broken the limit, and it is not inferior to the nature's test. The rank 4 poisonous insect is still too low for me. Su Li sighed secretly, undid the mark, and threw the poisonous power insect to Xian and senior sister apprentice. This, Xianen was immediately flattered. He held the little turtle in both hands and didn't know what to say for a while. He couldn't understand why Su Jiuzhou was so considerate to him when he and Su Jiuzhou met by chance. From the day she killed Gue region, he could see that this woman was by no means as kind as she looked on the surface. On the contrary, she was more like a ruthless female practitioner of the evil cult. However, she was extremely gentle to him. He was not a heartless person. Such gentleness made him feel a deep pressure, which made him inexplicably frightened. Take it. Su Li had lived 2 lives. How could she not know what Xianen was thinking? She said indifferently, "This thing is useless for me. Although you can barely use it, it is also a life-saving weapon if you use it well. I broke your sword rune, so I will compensate you with another one. However, compared with the sword rune, this thing is probably of a much lower grade." Her eyes were gentle, and she looked at Xian as if she was looking at Su Yu's stillborn son in the reincarnation mirror. She still didn't want to see the truth and falsehood in the reincarnation mirror. Some things had become her obsession. She could meet the son of Xian Jingzhou again in this life. Even if he was an enemy, she would make up for what she owed in the previous life. Although such behavior was selfish, she was selfish. Thinking of this, Su Li smiled more, but Xianen inexplicably felt a trace of bitterness, so that he couldn't bear to refuse Su Li again. He just took it and said cautiously and stupidly, "Senior sister apprentice, you are so kind to me, as good as my mother." "Your mother is very good to you?" Su Li asked casually. Xianan nodded naturally and said, "Yes, my mother is very fierce to my father, but she is very kind to me. Otherwise, I would have been caught by my father and put in confinement because of my slacking practice." Su Yu's face flashed in Su Li's mind involuntarily, and she chuckled. It turns out that the Lord of Jiguang's sect is a henpecked person. That's right. Xianan raised his head. If my mother said to go west, my father would never dare to go east. At that time, my mother was a famous cold beauty in Jili region. My father tried his best to get her, so he naturally cherished her very much. Suli nodded and didn't want to say more. She put out the bonfire, took the poisonous fish roasted on the bonfire, and handed it to Xian, and Xian's face suddenly became bitter. 2 hours later, Xian's eyes were dull, and he lay on the ground like a dead dog, motionless. He was sweating all over and was full of strong stench. How could this be a little pain? It was clearly a hell that was more terrible than confinement. Senior sister apprentice, you are too cruel. Even my father has not treated me like this. He reluctantly got up and sat up, looking at Su Li, who was absorbing Mushue's spiritual jade with a bitter face. Then, Su Li opened her eyes and waved her sleeves. Ah, Xianan shouted, and then he turned into a flying man and was thrown into the lake. The stench spread, and in an instant, many fish emerged from the water with their bellies up. Take a good bath. Your body is mixed with highly toxic, and it will take an hour to integrate into your body. If you don't take a good bath, don't blame others if you're poisoned to death later. Xianan finally swam out of the water. When he heard Su Li's words from a distance, his heart trembled fiercely. He didn't care that there were monsters in the lake, and immediately flapped his feet to take a bath. Su Li removed the tactical matrix, stood by the lake with her hands behind her back, and looked at Xianan calmly. He was protected too well by Xian Jingzhou, and he had hardly suffered. If this went on, although his talent was good, it would be difficult for him to make great achievements. If the Jiguang sect was destroyed, he would not escape death. In this case, she would be a villain and train him well. An hour later, Xianan climbed ashore with a bitter face. He put on his clothes and sat aside angrily, but he was extremely grateful to Su Li in his heart. At this moment, what was lying in his pubic region was no longer Jindan realm, but a baby carved from jade. He knew very well that if he only relied on his own practice, it would take at least 200 years to break through Yuanying realm. But with the help of his senior sister apprentice, the 200 years were shortened to a few days, and his foundation was solid, without any worries. Seeing that his childish temper was reversed, Su Li couldn't help laughing. She said helplessly, "Come here. I will teach you how to use the poisonous power insect." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.